Section 33 of In the Land of the Lion and Sun, or Modern Persia, by Charles James Wills. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Beeswaxcandle. Chapter 32. From the Persian Gulf to Ispahan. We ourselves, our small dog Pip in a cage, and our canaries, almost unknown in Persia, and 72 tiny avadavats, bought at Kurachi for 3 rupees, left in a boat for Shãh, on an estuary of the Gulf, thus avoiding the Makila plain, a dreadful march of mud and water, and shortening the journey to Shiraz by 2 stages. After 4 hours' pull and sail in the burning sun, we reached Shãh. This appeared simply a mud hut on the beach. There may have been a village, but we saw nothing of it. Here we mounted our sorry steeds. Some 3 hours after, we caught up with the rest of our loads, which had struggled out through the Makila the day before. All the mules were knocked up, and my wife was fatigued with the unwonted exertion of riding a muleteer's pony. This is at any time hard work for a man, for the beast does not answer the bit, bores continually on it, and strokes with light cutting whip are quite unfelt. There is also a struggle among the riding ponies, more used to loads than riders, as to who shall be last of all, in which a lady's pony is generally the victor. It had been impossible to buy a hack suited to a lady in Bushir. I had been asked English prices for the ghosts of steeds. Quite honestly, however, for Bushir prices are much higher than Shiraz ones. So after my wife's trying my pony, the cook's, and the head muleteer's, I got one of our escort, a good-natured fellow, clad in rags and smiles, to lend her his. This Yabu, common pony, was at all events easy, and had a canter in him at need. At sunset, the muleteer informed me that we were 20 miles from our halting place, Borusjun, and that the mules could do no more. It was hopeless to attempt to go on, as my wife was as tired as the mules. Night, happily a warm one, was coming on. There was no sign of any shelter for miles, the only thing visible on the sandy plain being the distant date groves, and these are of course no protection. The road was dry, which was something, and we had plenty of food with us, so we halted, spread our carpets, had tea, and later on dinner, and camped out. Rather a dreadful first day's travelling in Persia for a lady, to sleep without shelter and in her clothes in the middle of the road after travelling since 10 a.m. However, there was nothing else for it. The Shãh road is a very unfrequented one, and the country was safe and undisturbed. It was a lovely night, not a breath of wind. At 4 a.m. we had tea and started at 5, getting into Borusjun at 10. For the time of year, the luxuriant vegetation near the village was extraordinary. It was now late in October. The heat was great, and the amount of moisture in the air somewhat oppressive. We found capital rooms in the caravanserai, and the clerk at the telegraph station made us welcome to high tea, rather indignant that we had not come straight to the office. After that we started again, and reached our halting place at midnight. A dalike is a rest house maintained by the department for the use of the employees. A short distance from the rest house at Dalike is a hot spring of clearest water. The temperature is about 100 degrees, and being in a circular natural basin some 4 feet deep in the centre, and in a place where no warm bath can be had, it is a favourite halting place for travellers. Besides giving a comfortable bath, there is a peculiarity that I have seen nowhere else. The basin is full of myriads of fish, about the size of whitebait. On dipping the hand in, they at once cover it, and in a minute it is quite hid from sight by crowds of tiny fish. They have no fear, and can be removed in handfuls. On stripping and entering the basin, a curious effect is produced by one's limbs being black with the fish, which nibble at the skin, and only leave it when you plunge violently. On becoming still, one's body is again entirely covered with fish. From thence we travelled by day only. At each village I tried to get a pony for my wife. but nowhere could I succeed, though I was ready to buy anything not absolutely vicious. Mr. M. kindly gave us quarters at the telegraph office at Caspian, and here we rested a day. The kotuls, or passes, literally ladders, well known throughout the country, had astonished my wife. They were terrible places to ride up, and nearly impossible to ride down. She, however, was determined not to be beaten, and had ridden them all. We had been especially fortunate in our weather. No rain, though we saw many clouds, and it was imminent. As I was looking out of the window at the Caspian telegraph office, I saw a man mounted on a handsome grey mare. I hallooed, and he stopped. I went down and parleyed. The mare was sound and 6 years old, fast, light-mouthed. I felt that, if free from vice, she was what my wife wanted. I rode her, and succeeded in getting the man to close for 750 kerans, about £30. I gave him 50 kerans in cash and a bill on Shiraz for the remainder. I never regretted the purchase. The mare was all that a lady's horse should be. She was tall for Persia, being 14.3 in height, no goose rump, and very handsome. Her mouth soon got very light, and her only fault, a very trifling one, was that she carried her ears badly. My wife and I constantly rode her for 4 years, and after marching 28 stages from Ispahan to the Caspian on her with a side saddle on, I handed her over in good condition, having sold her for a fair price. Of course, the journey to my wife now became a pleasure. She had a horse of her own that did not jolt, and who at a word or a shake of the rein would canter or gallop, instead of the thwack, thwack of the muleteer's yaboo. By fancying the troubles of a lady compelled to cross the Rocky Mountains on a small Hampstead donkey with a tendency to fall, one might form some faint ideas of my wife's trials in getting over her 5 days' climb from the coast to Caspian. We here left the date groves, which had been numerous till now. 2 more passes remained to us, the Kotul Doctor and the Kotul Perizun, the passes of the Virgin and the Old Woman. That of the Old Woman is very bad indeed, and it is a wonder how loaded mules do get up it. Miles of awful road among loose rocks and stones, and then steep zigzags of paved road up a perpendicular cliff. Awful work. We did it, however, and did it in the night, for we had been stopped by a great firing of guns and alarm of thieves in the beautiful Oak Valley, and so lost the daylight. We avoided a great part of the pass by scrambling up Walker's Road, a straight path under the telegraph line, well enough to walk down, but almost impossible to ride up, particularly at night. Fortunately, we had a moon, and the weather was fine. My wife, however, was compelled to dismount twice, and we lugged, shoved, and dragged the horses up, the mules, of course, going by the high road. At last we did get in, but all tired out. Next day a longish march brought us to the hill leading down into the plain of Desht-i-Arjin. It was on this hill, some 11 years before, that Major St. was riding, when a lion suddenly sprang upon his horse's hindquarters. St. had only a very small Colt's revolver with him at the time, when suddenly he saw a lioness some 30 yards in front. He cracked his whip and shouted at her, thinking that she would bolt. She charged, sprang, and came down under his foot. With so small a pistol would have been useless to fire, so he spurred his horse, which, however, would not move. The lioness now attacked from the rear, standing on her hind legs and clawing the horse's hindquarters. He then jumped off, getting, however, one slight scratch. The horse now plunged and reared, knocking over the lioness on one side and the man on the other. The horse now was moving away. The lioness stared at the horse, the man at her. Then St. fired a couple of shots over her head to frighten her, but without effect. She sprang again on the horse's hindquarters, and both were lost to view. After an hour, St. found his horse, who, however, would not let him mount. He drove the animal to the little hamlet where he found a single family, but the fear of beasts would not let the head of it come out to search for the horse. However, next morning he was found quietly grazing, His quarters and flanks were scored in every direction with claw marks, and one wound had penetrated the flesh, which St. John sewed up. In a week the horse was as well as ever, but bore the marks for the rest of his life. I have taken the liberty of abridging Major St. John's own account of this real lion story from his note to the article Leo, in the work on the Zoology of Persia, Volume 2, edited by Mr. W. Blandford, the well-known naturalist. At the time the affair took place, Major St. John was superintendent of the Persian Telegraph Department. Shortly after, I had the honour of serving under him in Shiraz for some time, and was indebted to him for many kindnesses. I saw the horse some 2 years after the affair, and the scars were very apparent. I did not tell my wife this story till we had passed the stage, and there was no more lion country. Our next march brought us to Khan Zinyun, where a handsome caravanserai had been built by the Nãsir, the great man of Shiraz. Before reaching it, we passed a pole, marking the place where the body of Sergeant Collins was found, after his murder by highway robbers in the famine time. The next morning we rode into Shiraz, and had no sooner reached our house than the expected rain, which had happily held off during our journey, began to fall. The sky was overcast, and continuous storms took place, which lasted for a fortnight. Thanking our lucky stars, we prepared to make ourselves as comfortable as possible, and set to unpack and arrange our quarters. When we arrived at Shiraz, the superintendent's house, which was in a garden just out of the town, was kindly placed at our disposal. In a few days I succeeded in hiring a good new brick-built house. We bought a few carpets and moved into it. My colleague, Dr. Odling, kindly gave us the loan of his furniture for the 6 months he expected to be away on leave, which was a good thing, as one cannot get furniture made in Shiraz, and everything has to be ordered in India or Ispahan. In the latter place there are fairly good carpenters. Our house was the property of the superintendent of the government powder mills, and for 10 tomans, or £4 a month, we hired it for the 6 months that we should have to stop in Shiraz during my colleague's leave of absence. On his return, it had been arranged that we were to go to Ispahan, where we were to be permanently stationed. The house was formed of a quadrangle, having rooms on 3 sides and a dead wall at the end. The greater portion of our kit being in tin-lined cases and intended for our permanent abode, we did not unpack. After about a week we had settled down into working order, obtained a fair cook, and old and respectable servants, put our little crescent car together, a small low dog cart built by Macmullen of Hertford, which has the great advantage of taking to pieces, being easily put together, easily packed in small and light parcels, and was thoroughly seasoned, and stood the extraordinary dryness of the climate without cracking or warping, which is saying a great deal. The next thing was to get a trap horse. The roads are mere tracks and very rough and heavy, and a strong animal was required. I managed for £12 to pick up a cobby pony of 13.2. I had him gelded, as even in Persia it is considered unsafe to drive an entire horse, and he, with another animal I gave £7 for, were handed over to the coachman of the Nãsir to be broken. I had vainly attempted to break them myself with a gun carriage. My little dog-cart was too light and pretty to risk a smash with. After a fortnight, the Nãsir's coachman informed me that both were quite broken. I suggested that he should drive them in his master's trap, a big brougham, but he evidently feared an accident, and gave up the job in despair. Another fellow, however, took it in hand, and after a few days I rode out some 5 miles, and was glad to find that one of the ponies was fairly broken, the little grey one. The other was hopeless. He, however, answered well as a servant's drudge. We were now able to take frequent drives, though a long one, from the heavy state of the roads, generally kept the pony in the stable for a couple of days. Still, it was nice driving over the plain, when once outside Shiraz and its environs. My wife found the life amusing from its novelty, and as we were not to remain in Shiraz during the summer, which is the unhealthy time, our stay was enjoyable enough. As Shiraz has been previously described, there is nothing more to be said than that the winter soon slipped away, and the spring, the most enjoyable part of the year in Shiraz, arrived, bringing the jaunts to gardens so usual there. My colleague, anxiously expected, did not, however, arrive till July, and the weather had then got so hot as to necessitate our marching up to Ispahan by night. As I have not noticed this mode of travelling before, I cannot do better than quote my wife's diary, which gives her experience of the matter. On Tuesday, July the 17th, 1877, everything being ready, we were informed that our muleteer was unable to start, his mules being 100 miles off. So after much delay we found another, and engaged with him for 40 mules, each carrying 350 pounds, at the rate of 700 pounds from Shiraz to Ispahan for £2 8. Besides this, our cook had 3 mules for himself and his family, and with our own 3 horses we shall form quite a respectable cavalcade. Shiraz to Zergun, 24 miles. On Wednesday the 18th, after weighing all our cases and tying them up with the charwadaz ropes, at 6 p.m. we rode out, accompanied by Mirza Hassan Ali Khan, our friend, the British agent here, having started all our servants, bedding and road kit on 6 mules. We kept 1 servant with us, and a golem, or irregular cavalryman, having an order from the governor of Fars and all the chiefs of villages to vacate their houses if needed, and to find us with food and forage, of course being paid for them. No sooner had we cleared the town than, to our disgust, we found our pantryman surrounded by his weeping relatives, his wife and our cook's lady being unable to tear themselves from their sympathizing friends. This, of course, did not matter, but alas, the mule load with our bedding was with them. My husband, by a free use of threats, compelled Abdul Hamid, the pantryman, to start, the golem following in charge of the mule which carried Hamid's wife and the cook's wife and daughter, a girl of 9, all closely veiled and weeping copiously. On getting about a mile out, the cage containing 8 canaries, 2 goldfinches, and 18 avadavats, which we had got at Kurachi, was given to Hamid to carry in front of him. But as it was his first journey and attempt at riding, after about a couple of 100 yards he and the cage came crash to the ground, some avadavats escaping, so we gave the cage to a villager to carry on his head. We then bid good-bye to Mirza Hassan Ali Khan, and my husband now was occupied in whipping on the mule of the helpless Abdul Hamid to get him up to the other servants, in which he succeeded after we had gone 12 miles. From the packing and excitement about getting mules, and not having had anything since breakfast at 1 p.m, we were very tired, as were the horses, which had been, from peculiar circumstances, obliged to keep on grass for the last 3 weeks. The road was a good one, but the moon gave very little light, and we could not canter on that account, and for fear of the servants lagging. This stage was formerly a very bad one, but the road was made good last year when the king was expected in Shiraz. At last, at 11 p.m, we reached the Chupakana, or post-house at Zergun, where we took the balakana, or upper room. We drank some milk and lay down till our dinner, a roast fowl and potatoes and custard pudding, was ready. It was not till nearly 1 hour after midnight. After that we slept heavily till 7 a.m, when we were glad of our tea and devilled fowl. We had breakfast at 12, and vainly expected the mules all day, and after seeing our horses groomed and fed, we dined at 7 on soup, boiled fowl and caper sauce, Irish stew, custard pudding, figs and grapes. Ice, of course, was not procurable. Our wine we brought with us, and we always have a flask full of it for the road. Just after starting at 2:30 a.m. in the dark, we had a basin of soup, and having got all our servants off, started for our second stage. At 3 we got off, and after nearly missing the road, we marched along with our mules till dawn, when we cantered over a good and level road, and feeling tired at sunrise, got down and had some cold fowl and wine. Another hour brought us to Hajiabad, where we found 2 comfortable rooms occupied by some small official, of whose carpets and waterskin we took possession, by means of a few Korans, and slept till breakfast. We again rested till 5 p.m, when we had soup, and started, reaching Sivend at 9 p.m, 7 hours' journey, 32 miles from Zergun. To our disgust, we found that the inspector had locked every room in the telegraph office, he being on leave. So we took up our quarters on the veranda, which was fairly cool. In the morning, still no mules, so we moved over to the best house in the village, where we are very comfortable. We were glad to give our horses a rest, for the sudden exertion after grass had done them no good. We passed our day in seeing our saddles cleaned, the washing of Pip, and writing letters. At night, the place being full of cats who attacked the birds, C shot 2 and missed 2 more. They, however, ate 1 canary, and the wires being broken, C had to pursue another bird over many roofs, catching him at last unhurt. Sunday. Still no news of mules. Sent a Qasid, or foot messenger, with a letter to Shiraz, asking for steps to be taken to get them out. The man is to get half a crown for walking the 56 miles in 18 hours, and to bring back an answer. Monday. Venison for breakfast. We got a welcome present of snow last night, and by laying the top of the table on the birdcage, succeeded in defying the cats. At 12 p.m. Wednesday, having no news of our mules, we engaged 2 muleteers, started, and in 2 hours marched to Kawamabad, 8 miles, fording the river Bendemeer halfway. A fair road. The weather changed here. It was very chilly on arrival, and cool and windy all day. Left Kawamabad at 6 p.m. Thursday, and reached the tomb of Cyrus at 12, where we rested a little, and ate some fowl, and found the night very cold. The monument is like a huge dog kennel of great squared stones on a stone platform. Usher states the tomb itself to be 43 feet by 37. There are 7 stone steps which diminish in thickness as one ascends. The kennel-like edifice at the top is 21 feet by 16 only. The thickness is 5 feet. The interior dimensions are 10 feet long, 7 wide and 8 high. There are no inscriptions. The door is 4 feet high only. There are the remains of 24 columns, 6 on each side. Got to Murkab, 28 miles at 2 a.m. A very long and fatiguing march, several passes. This place is celebrated for carpets, but we failed to obtain any. In the centre of the village there is a large piece of turf, like a cricket field, the only piece of turf I have seen as yet. Left at 6 p.m. A bad road with several passes, till halfway, when it became a sort of step. Here we came on a number of mules grazing. We fortunately sent a man to ask whose they were, and they turned out to be our loads and the missing Chawada, who had passed us when we halted at Sivend. Our difficulties will now be much less, as with lots of muleteers we shall get loaded and off quickly, and our bedding mule, which at present carries my fortnightly box, C's portmanteau, a carpet, 2 heavy chairs and a table, the champagne box full of wine, an India rubber sack full of odds and ends, my little black bag, a heavy cage for Pip, and the bird's cage 1 yard long, besides our bedding, and its pack saddle weighing 30 pounds, will go much lighter. We shall also get our bath, which had gone on with the loads. We reached Debid, 26 miles at 2. We had soup and fowl on the road and were very glad to get in. There is nothing here but a chapakhana, a caravanserai in ruins, and a telegraph office. It is delightfully cool and windy. The water, too, is like ice, and very good. Nothing to be got but bread, but we had supplies with us. Left at 9 p.m. and over a fair road with 2 small passes to Konakura, 24 miles. This is a more lonely place than the last. Water only and cucumbers to be got. A post house and caravanserai, in ruins, the only houses, and nothing nearer than 24 miles. The flies so hungry here that they bite and hurt. Left at 6 p.m. over a level plain and splendid road. Stopped at Faizabad, 24 miles at 12 midnight, and taking the best house, a very good one with 2 rooms overlooking a garden, slept again in the open air. Much warmer here. Meat to be got again. We are now out of the wilderness. Had a really comfortable rest here. Left at 10 p.m. Reached Abada, 16 miles, at 2 a.m. Our groom had lagged behind with the horse clothing, and the other 2 men had lost their way. So we, the cook and the bedding, arrived alone. C had to tie up the horses as best he could, and we took an hour to get to bed. The road was good, and in the morning we got a fair mutton steak, but no fruit was to be had. Left at 10 p.m. Abade is a large place enclosed in a mud wall, the post house being outside. It is celebrated for spoons carved in wood in a wonderful manner, but they are useless and dear. Here Mr. Carapet of the department hospitably entertained us and gave us a capital dinner and a leg of mutton for the road. Over a long plain, 24 miles to Shurgistan. Put up in the guest house of the shrine. Arrived at 3:30. Nothing to be got here. So hot that we had to go downstairs. The lower rooms are cooler. Left at 8:30 p.m. and over a long plain to Yezdikhasht, 20 miles, where we arrived at 1. A fine caravanserai. Got a good room on the roof. People here report the king's death and there is a panic. The place is peculiar, being built on a high cliff which is in the middle of a deep gorge nearly a mile wide, a small river running down the middle. Our golem left us here, this being the frontier of Fars. Left at 6 p.m. with 3 guards on horseback. The road reported to be not safe. This stage is where C was robbed and where the Bakhtiaris make their incursions. 26 miles to Maqsud Beg, a long road. Arrived at 2 a.m. Took the guards the whole way, or we should never have found the Chupacana, which is off the road. Got some good bread here at a small village. Found a load of ice sent us from Kumishah, a welcome present from the inspector there. A good room twice the usual size, very cool. A high wind all day and night. Left at 7:30 for Kumishah, 16 miles. A fair road, wind very high and cold. Arrived at 11:30 after much trouble in a rocky valley, servants losing themselves and coming to grief. The brown horse went lame from a projecting nail and had to be led. Were hospitably entertained by the inspector, Sergeant McIntyre, who gave us a breakfast of many dishes. A large place, but in ruins. Very cool. A fine shrine and resting place for pilgrims, accommodating some thousands. Left at 5:30, 20 miles over a dreary plain to Maya, a large caravanserai, and a village which is the Shah's personal property, in ruins. Arrived at 11:30. No beds, as we got in 2 hours before the loads. I was so tired I lay down and slept in my habit. We were all too tired to eat, and the servants were dead beat, so we went without dinner, ordering a good breakfast to be served as soon as we should wake. Being determined to try and get into Ispahan, or rather Julfa, tomorrow, an early move was necessary. We started at 5 p.m. and reached Marg Caravanserai, 28 long miles at 2 a.m. Here my husband determined to halt for a few hours, and I slept till dawn in a wretched hole. There were good quarters in the Chapakana, post house, and the post house and caravanserai were all that Marg consists of, but we were told that glanders had been rife there, and we were afraid to trust our horses in the place. At dawn our caravan arrived. The muleteers and servants swore they could do no more, but a little persuasion and a promise of a present got them off, after feeding their mules, and we cantered on, reaching our quarters at 10 a.m. after a hot ride in the sun. By this forced march we escaped the meeting with new friends, who otherwise, had we arrived the next day as was calculated, would have ridden out to meet us. I lay down at once, and the mules and their riders dropped in one by one, each man on his arrival seeming to shout louder than his predecessor. But our journey was over, and I trust I may never again have to march 300 miles at night. End of section 33. Section 34 of In the Land of the Lion and Sun, or Modern Persia, by Charles James Wills. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Beeswaxcandle. Chapter 33. Julfa. After a considerable amount of diplomacy, we managed to secure a fine large house with a good garden and stabling in the principal and best street of Julfa. My wife was pleased with the cool climate of Ispahan, the abundance of water, and the rows of trees with which each street is planted. The Armenian is a thrifty fellow, and plants the zoben-i-gungishk, or sparrow-tongue, a sort of willow, on either side of the small ditch which runs down the side or centre of the streets. This ditch brings the water for the irrigation of the gardens, and by planting the trees he obtains shade and firewood. For the zoban-i-gungishk is the best of all woods for fuel, and the roots keep the ditch banks solid and in good repair. Cool and pretty as the streets look from the unaccustomed masses of foliage, one soon finds that one is in a Christian village. Sheep and oxen are slaughtered all down the principal street in the most public manner, and on Saturday night especially drunkards are common, while swarms of loafers, generally men who live on small pensions from relatives in India, lean with their backs against the wall, basking in the early sun, or sprawl in the shade during the heat. In each doorway sit or lounge the women, but their hands and tongues are busily employed. They knit socks as long as daylight lasts. Some widows even maintain a family by this industry. With nose and mouth hidden, poorly fed, but well and warmly clad, the Armenian woman makes up by her industry for the laziness of her husband. She sweeps the house and yard, cooks the food, makes the clothes, bakes the bread, makes wine, arak, flour, for this is generally ground in a hand-mill by the poor, and the rest of her time is filled up by knitting. These Armenian women are notable housekeepers, and though generally ignorant and ungraceful, a girl is never even fairly good-looking after 17, they are hard-working and very virtuous. In most of the quarters of Julfa may be seen at the roadside huge stone mortars for the pounding of rice, by which means it is extracted from the husk. These are the remains of the teeming Julfa of other days, when it was a large city with 24 crowded parishes, each with its church, the ruins of most of which are now all that remain of the parishes. You seldom see a Julfa man pounding at one of the huge mortars. He prefers to hire a Mussulman or villager to do the heavy work for him, and as he does not care to part with his money, thrift, Horatio, the payment is generally a glass of spirits. These spirits cost nothing, as each man makes his own wine, which he sells, and from the refuse his arak, which he drinks. Armenians seldom drink wine. It is not strong enough for them, and arak is much more to their taste. All the refuse, after clearing the wine, is put in a big pot. A head and worm is fixed on with mud, and distillation by means of a very slow fire of big logs is proceeded with. The product is redistilled once, and even a third time. A strong, rough spirit is the result. It is generally coloured green and flavoured by thrusting a handful of leaves of anise, raciana, into the receiver. Of course, the spirit is quite pure, being after a third distillation simply strong spirits of wine. What the Armenians sell, however, is much adulterated and drugged. It is known as fixed bayonets, and is simply made to produce intoxication. I secured a fine house in Julfa for £48 a year. One side of this house, it formed 2 of the 4 enclosing sides of a big garden, is shown in the illustration. The immense window indicates the great size of the huge T-shaped summer room, or urusi, the floor of which was tiled. The fountain is seen playing in the house, or ornamental tank, in front of the urusi. My landlord had a fine vineyard at the side of my house, and for a yearly payment of 100 kerans I secured the right of entry, and the privilege of eating as many grapes as we pleased. The landlord, however, made mud bricks, and covered over all the paths with the freshly made bricks laid to dry. It was only, finding remonstrance ineffectual, by calling our 5 dogs in with us and letting them run over the soft bricks, that I could get him to clear the paths. I found, too, that I was waterless, directly water became scarce and dear, the man having sold our water. Fortunately, the lease specified the water, so I took the water and referred the purchasers to my landlord. They beat him and got back their money. I saw the three arguing and fighting for several days. How the matter ended I did not inquire. I got my water. Twice in my house concealed treasure had been discovered, once to a large amount by the grandfather of my landlord, and a second time to a smaller value by his father. On this second occasion, the well running dry, men were sent down to deepen it. A door was found in the wall, and a quantity of arms and clothing were discovered in a small chamber in the wall, but no money or jewels. I found a secret chamber in this house, but it was empty. Of course, my wife had to be taken to that terrible fraud, the shaking minarets. Why, no one knows, but everyone has heard of the shaking minarets. You went to Ispahan? What did you think of the shaking minarets? Is constantly asked by those who have not been there. Even those who have, much on the principle of the bumpkin who on paying his penny is triumphantly shown the biggest donkey in the fair in a looking-glass, and urges his friends to go and see that show, so does a feeling of having been defrauded cause people to advise their friends to see the shaking minarets. The mere name is poetical and mysterious. Upon a gentleman high in the diplomatic service being asked what was the use of the British agent at Ispahan, he replied, "Oh, it is an hereditary office. He shows British travellers the shaking minarets." But then that Excellency was a humorous man. He it was who, on being troubled by a pertinacious clergyman with many grievances, and told by him, the parson, that he was but an humble member of the church militant, replied, "Church pugnacious, you mean?" Dearly did the British agent love to perform his hereditary function. The newcomer, full of desire to see the shaking minarets, and really pleased with his visit to the town of Ispahan, would make the appointment for the sight, and seeing the hereditary functionary's enthusiasm, not liking to damp it, would acknowledge that he had seen the eighth wonder of the world. And our sharp canter through bridle paths and shady lanes, after crossing the river by the old Marnoon bridge, would bring one to the little shrine, through the power of whose pir, or saint, there interred, the miracle of the shaking minarets is daily on view. As one approached the village where the shrine is, the labourers in the field would begin to run towards it, each eager to be the holder of a European's horse, and their shouts would bring a crowd to the scene. There is nothing particularly wonderful about the shrine. It is under a lofty arch of modern construction, and is the usual rectangular chest, under which reposes the body of the saint. On the whole lies an open Koran and reading stand. The chest is covered by a ragged pall of cotton cloth, and a few strings of copper candles or votive offerings in the shape of small copper cylinders constricted in the middle attest the popularity of the saint with the villagers. The guardian, also the village schoolmaster, is a Sayyid, or holy man. No information can be obtained from him, save that the dead saint has great power, and that the shaking is a miracle. Proceeding to the top of the shrine, a good view of the Ispahan valley is obtained, and here one sees the celebrated shaking minarets. A lusty villager ascends each, and by dint of strong shaking, both vibrate considerably. The hereditary functionary used to do this himself with great gusto, but having visited England, has become too important for the personal exercise of his functions. When one man ceases to shake, the vibration continues in both, and a peculiar sensation of insecurity is felt when one is inside the minaret. The minarets are some 12 or 14 feet high above the roof. They are of brick, and the fact is that being continuous with a long thin wall which connects the two at the base, the vibration caused in one is communicated to the other. This is the miracle. which will probably someday cease by the vibrator being propelled into space. And then the office of the hereditary functionary will really be a sinecure. The place, however, has been repaired, and the minarets rebuilt within the last 30 years, so the Guardian says. I fancy that the explanation of the miracle lies in the hypothesis I have suggested, the long wall on which the minarets are built having probably settled, and so having no communication with the side walls, being no miracle, but merely bad building. We saw the miracle, expressed our wonder, thanked the hereditary functionary, and went home sadder and wiser than we came. Vaccination is now happily appreciated in Persia. On my first arrival it was unknown, and inoculation was regularly practised. Another plan, too, was common, and the future native pastor of the Protestant Armenians lost a child by its practice. He put his own child in bed with a child having smallpox, that it might take the disease in a benign form. Confluent smallpox of the most virulent type resulted, and the poor child died to the great grief of the parent, a most deserving and honest fellow. This man and one other are the only teetotalers of Julfa, which may dispute the palm with any Scotch town for capability of swallowing liquor on a Sunday. So common is drunkenness here that an old cook of mine, an English-speaking Armenian, used to say to me on Sunday night, "Dinner finished, sir. If you no orders, I go get drunk with my priest." Needless to add that they both did get drunk, and that it was at the cook's expense. Happily, there are some few exceptions among the Julfa priests, for all India, Persia, and Batavia are supplied with priests for their Armenian communities from Julfa. Spirits are supposed to deaden pain, and Yezdi, a Guebra, fire worshipper, who had lodged some slugs and iron in his hand prior to my removing them, swallowed a quart of strong spirit without my knowledge. I supposed him to become suddenly delirious, but he was only suddenly drunk. Our first care was to make a road for our little dog-cart. The gates separating the parishes were mostly too narrow to let it pass, and we finally made one 6 feet wide at the narrowest, having 3 bridges without parapets, which we widened, and one was at a sharp angle, and a deep ditch the whole way on one side and a wall on the other. This was capital for a small 2-wheel thing, as long as the horse didn't jib or shy, or we didn't meet anyone. Happily it did not in our time, but when we got a bigger trap, a park phaeton, with a pair of horses, the pleasure of our drive was somewhat damped by the possibility of a capsize at night in the dark. But the cherub that always keeps a watch over poor Jack must have been on duty, for we never did have an accident. It was Hobson's choice, that road or none. Crossing the river at Manun became our favourite ride, and here one could canter for miles on a good road, the greater part of which was shaded by the gardens and orchards on either side. A great deal of firewood, too, is grown in this neighbourhood. Water is plentiful, and so firewood is a staple crop. Getting out beyond the gardens, on a small mountain standing by itself on the plain, was the ruin of an ancient fire temple. It was merely built of mud bricks, but here at Ispahan these remained for centuries, and it was only on climbing up to it that one perceived that it was not all quite modern, and a small portion built of very large bricks on an ancient wall. A grand view was got from it, as it commanded the entire plain. Several large plane trees are to be seen in the villages, many with platforms built round them, where the villagers sit and smoke in the evenings. A sort of semi-sacred character is attached to some of them, particularly to one which is called the Plain of Motaza Ali. A striking figure at Julfa is the so-called racecourse at Ferhabad. A couple of walls enclose a straight run of over a mile. These walls, which are in ruins and of mud, have at intervals various pavilions, some of the rooms of which are still almost perfect. At the end is a large square, having many rooms round it in a still better state. The road turned at a right angle towards the village of Julfa, but as this is intersected by wells and watercourses, It is not used as a cantering ground. The place is supposed to have been the summer palace of the Afghan conquerors. Ruins and ancient buildings, when built of burnt bricks, rapidly disappear in Persia. It is for a very simple reason. It is cheaper to demolish an old building and carry off the good seasoned bricks by donkey loads than to make and burn new ones, which often crumble. In my own time, a large and handsome college near the Charbagh of Ispahan has utterly disappeared, the prince having given an order for its demolition, and that the material be used in making the new one he has now completed. The very foundations were grubbed up. In Ispahan itself, every third house is a ruin, and in Julfa, the walls of gardens and orchards often contain the bare inner walls of ancient houses, which retain the brightness of their painting and gilding in the dry and pure air. Donkeys, as beasts of burden, are much employed in a country where there are no carts or wheeled vehicles. Save in the capital, the donkeys do all the ordinary work of vehicles. Earth, manure, produce, firewood, charcoal, grain are all carried on these beasts or on mules. Each animal has his pack saddle on which he lives and sleeps. It is only removed when the donkey gets a rare and very occasional curry-combing from a very primitive sort of instrument, having jangling rings, which produce a music supposed to be soothing to a donkey's soul. Every villager has his donkey. If more than one, he is well-to-do. The ordinary wage of a man is 1 Quran, a man and donkey 1 Quran and a half, and each additional donkey half a Quran. They work from sunrise to sunset, with an hour's interval for feeding. Julfa is a particularly healthy place, for the cesspools are constantly kept clean by the market gardeners, who pay for the privilege of removing the manure. By mixing the contents of the cesspools with ashes, a dry and portable manure is produced to the highest efficacy and odourless. It is removed on donkeys and stored in the fields until required. In the very depth of the winter, when snow and ice had rendered the ride to the town highly dangerous for horses, I was summoned in haste to see my old patient, the Sultan, now the most important man in the kingdom next to the king. I went, though risking my horse's knees, and was rather disgusted to find that I was sent for to see if he was ill or not, as he was not sure. I found him in a hot room, temperature 80 by the thermometer, wrapped in furs, being shampooed by 3 attendants, while a 4th was reading poetry to him. He was, I told him, in a fair way to get ill, and that air and exercise were all he needed. He took my advice, and returned to his usual very active life. He showed me an armoury of some 800 rifles, with a proportionate amount of fowling pieces and pistols. I expressed the desired amount of admiration. I suppose the time will come when His Royal Highness will make an effort for the throne, probably on the present Shah's death. 'Twill be a lucky day for Persia if he succeeds, as he is clever, tolerant, and a good governor. His personal popularity is very great, and his luck as a governor proverbial. He has a dislike to deeds of blood, but is a severe governor, like his uncle, the late Hissam-ul-Sultaneh, whose virtues he emulates. The Valiat, or heir apparent, on the contrary, is physically weak and mentally imbecile, being a bigot in the hands of a few holy men, and as impracticable as he is obstinate. No doubt, if he ever does reign, a black time will set in for the country, for religious persecution on a gigantic scale will commence, and the future of Iran be very sad. The Sultan has just got 2 bull terriers from England. He was convinced of their ferocity, and certainly the dog, very short-faced, and almost a bulldog, was of terrific appearance. His Royal Highness caused them to be let into the courtyard, cautioning me to be very still, as not knowing me, they might attack me, and providing me with a lump of sugar to appease them. Of course, nothing of the sort took place, but the dogs ran about and smelt the various grandees, to their great disgust. The prince made great pets of them, feeding them with sugar. I was surprised to find that though these dogs had not seen an Englishman for months, yet on my speaking to them in English, They followed me about, fawning on me, and neglecting the prince and the dogman who was their valet. Since this time, the prince has procured 2 huge half-bred Dutch mastiffs, in which he greatly rejoices. And these animals, though not fierce, are certainly very powerful dogs. Strange that the love of animals in a man like the Zilli Sultan should so overcome the Mussulman dislike of the unclean beast. The dogs were in the habit of licking the prince's hand. This particular winter was an unusually severe one. There was much snow, and it was impossible to get out for rides for a fortnight, and 2 storerooms of my huge house fell in, from the heavy mud roofs being soaked with water and breaking their supports by the enormous increase of weight. On one occasion in the early spring, we had ridden out to the garden palace of Haft-Dust, and were preparing to take tea, when with great noise the Zilli Sultan rode into the place with some 50 horsemen. No sooner did he see and recognize my servants than he asked if I was alone. On hearing that my wife, my house, as my man put it, was with me, he rode out, taking all his followers with him, and sending me a message to go on with my tea, that he trusted I should enjoy my visit, that the place was mine as long as I pleased, etc. Europeans avoid the Persians when with ladies, as very ridiculous scenes are at times the result. One gentleman, whose wife was not in her first youth, on meeting the prince when riding with her, instead of avoiding him, stopped to speak. It was one of his rude days, for he calmly asked, in defiance of the rules of Persian politeness, which demand the ignoring of the existence of any female, "Is that your wife?" "Yes, my wife." "Well, I wouldn't have a wife so old and ugly as that. Get a young one." The situation for both lady and gentleman was embarrassing. End of section 34. Section 35 of In the Land of the Lion and Sun, or Modern Persia, by Charles James Wills. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Beeswaxcandle. Chapter 34. Journey to and from Teheran. After an 18-month stay in Julfa, Ispahan, I received orders to proceed to Teheran to act for my chief. We started, my wife travelling in a takht rohan, moving bed. This consists of a box with doors and windows, 6 feet long, 3 feet wide, and 4 feet high. A thick mattress is placed in it and plenty of pillows. Where the road is fairly level, as from Ispahan to Teheran, it's not a bad way of travelling for a lady. The great cause of her satisfaction to her was that she had her baby with her. Water was kept out of the machine by a waterproof sheet being tacked to the top, and a thick carpet was lashed over the roof when travelling in strong sun. At each end of the box are shafts, and between each pair a mule. The movement is at first rather sickening, but this is soon got over, and the traveller sleeps the greater portion of the stage. Although we travelled as lightly as possible, we were forced to take 24 mules, and were heartily glad when our journey, which was 12 long stages, and without incident of any kind, was over. I hired a little house at Gulhek, the village where are situated the summer quarters of the English embassy, and where lives the chief of my department, in the summer. In addition to my own work, I was in charge of the staff of the Indo-European Telegraph Company's line, who lived in Teheran. Our own signalling staff, too, lived in the town. As, however, we had an exceptionally healthy summer, the duties were very light. I was also placed in medical charge of the Russian embassy by the Russian ambassador, Monsieur Zinoviev, for the greater part of my 6-month stay, their own physician having gone to Russia for a time on private business. Gulhek is one of the villages at the foot of the mountains bounding the Teheran Valley, and by prescriptive right the English legation go to Gulhek, the Russians to the next village, Zergende, and the French to another, a couple of miles higher, called Tejresh. These places are delightfully cool, and if the signallers of the department and of the company could be moved to them, it would be a great boon to the men, for it is terribly hot and unhealthy in the town, and the expense would not be great. In fact, it ought to be done. Lawn tennis, when we arrived, was in high vogue, and was played every afternoon on a level ground. A lawn in Persia is nearly impossible, mudded over with what is termed kargil, a mixture of kar, cut straw, and gil, mud. This forms a sort of sheet of smooth and springy ground, which gives a good foothold and dries rapidly. The tennis was justly popular, and was the most pleasant means of obtaining exercise, and consequently health. Our own comfort was increased by the arrival of an English nurse, whom we had engaged to come out for a certain 3 years. I was enabled to buy a small park phaeton and a pair of well-broken horses from a German, the master of the Shah's mint, who was leaving because he declined to debase the coinage, which was contrary to the terms of his agreement. In the garden next to ours lived a Guebre. A few of these men have been under the protection of the English embassy time out of mind. He kept us supplied with strawberries at 10p a plateful, and as we had not tasted them since leaving England, they were a great luxury, particularly in a warm climate. The greater part of the road from Gulhet to Teheran, being the way to the Shah's favourite summer residences, is planted on both sides with trees and shrubs. These give a grateful shade, and as the road is in good order, it is pleasant driving. But when thronged, the dust rises and covers everything, so that it is like a very dusty return from the Derby, but with no excitement, and hotter. Still, a good road in nearly roadless Persia was a thing to be taken advantage of. And several times when out driving we met the Shah, and invariably drew on one side to allow him to pass. His Majesty was always very polite, and returned our salutes. On our passing the first time, he sent a man to inquire who we were. The Prime Minister, too, was particular in behaving in a civilized manner, but the ragamuffin attendants on the royal ladies always used to shout, "Begone! Be off!" and their postilions would always drive as close as possible, and pass one as if they wished to collision or to take a wheel off. The custom of kuruk is dying out. It used to be death for any man to be in the neighbourhood of the royal wives when on their numerous outings. The people always fled or stood with faces to the wall, and Europeans, when they saw the eunuch's procession approaching and heard the cry of "Geçin," Turkish "begone," to avoid unpleasantness and possible rows, used to turn down the first street. A very eccentric Austrian, the Baron Gersteiger Khan, the latter title of course being a Persian dignity, for many years instructor to the Persian army and at last general, principal officer of the engineers and constructor of roads, in which latter work he has really left some striking marks of his success, on meeting the ladies when he was on foot, turned his face to the wall like a native, and as each carriage passed, deliberately saluted from the back of his head. This delighted the ladies, and they informed the Shah. The Shah sent for Gersteiger and made him repeat his salutes, and after laughing a good deal, gave him a handsome present. The king generally travelled in a carriage, very like a sheriff's, with 8 pairs of horses harnessed to it, with postilions. They went at a fair pace, were always preceded by the royal runners, shatirs, clad in their ancient Persian dress of red, with the curious turreted hat, like a fool's cap and bells, and each bearing a gold baton. These men were all good runners, and some 6 or 8 ran in front, while 1 or 2 always kept at His Majesty's side. While we were in Teheran, a number of Russian officers were engaged in forming some so-called Cossack regiments. They engaged horsemen, whom they regularly paid, and seemed to be teaching these men their drills successfully. These so-called Cossacks were the Shah's favourite toy of the moment, and he was never tired of reviewing them. They were well but plainly dressed, well horsed and well armed, and the Russian officers were very popular with both the Shah and soldiers. A large contingent of Austrian officers had also arrived to instruct the infantry and artillery, and though these gentlemen were well paid, they did not find Persia the El Dorado they expected. Some of them resigned while I was there. They also fought among themselves, and all have now, I fancy, left the country. The capital was ever rather a rowdy place. Murders and burglaries were common, and as in other towns of Persia, the darogas, or police masters, and their dependents were so mercenary that the townspeople preferred being robbed to complaining to them, on the principle of two evils to choose the less. The manufacture of false money had become a national evil, and forgeries of the royal seals were frequent. The first evil was thought to be got over by calling in the old rough coinage, which was hammer-struck, and substituting a handsome series of medals in gold and silver, having milled edges. These were introduced with great success, and the new coinage was handsome and popular. But it was soon counterfeited. And when the nuisance had attained its height, the Count Monteforte arrived with special credentials from the Emperor of Austria and was installed as head of police. This gentleman seemed to be exactly the right man in the right place. He got on with the natives, in a few weeks established a character for honesty and shrewdness, detected many offenders, recovered much stolen property, and established a regiment of police, well-drilled, well-dressed, honest, polite, and who refused bribes. As bribes are to the Persian what beef is to the Englishman, these phenomena have probably ere this been either shelved or corrupted. But when we were in Teheran in 1880, they were in full swing, and the wonder and admiration of foreigners and natives. Just one street in Teheran is very much Europeanized. It is fairly paved and lighted by lamp-posts containing candles. It is called the Boulevard des Ambassadeurs, and as it is a wide street, the view from the bottom is somewhat striking, ending as it does in the green hills and black mountains covered on their tops with snow. At the top, approached by an ornamental gate of great size, is the palace of the English ambassador. This has been recently erected at enormous cost, partly from designs by the late Major Pearson, R.E. It is surrounded by trees, and the edifice meets the requirements of the country, and is very original in appearance. It stands in a magnificent garden of great size, in which are placed the houses of the secretaries, built like English villas of the better class. The interior of the embassy is furnished with great splendour, with English furniture, and our ambassador to the court of Persia is lodged, as he should be, en prince. The rest of the town is wholly oriental. Dead walls of mud and brick are seen in every direction. The streets are mud in winter and dust in summer. The principal feature in Teheran is the numerous tiled gates. These structures, covered with floridly coloured tiles and elaborate patterns, mostly geometrical, having centrepieces of representations of scenes from the mythology of Persia, were certainly novel and curious. As a rule, the modern tile work is in striking contrast to the ancient, which is much chaster and in better taste. Of the many palaces, none were worth description, of those that I visited, which were all mere summer retreats. They were gaudy, much painted and gilt, and the white plasterwork, decorated with mirrors, was the only kind of ornamentation having the slightest pretence to be artistic. The dry climate, however, enables this effective style of decoration to be used for exteriors, and it retains its pristine whiteness in the clear air for many years. Many large buildings seen from a distance in Teheran have a great appearance of magnificence, and it does not strike the beholder at first that they are merely plaster of Paris over mud bricks. To them the term whitened sepulchre is particularly appropriate. But the insecurity of property must be considered, and a man would be unwise to build an expensive edifice which would expose him to jealousy. The bazaars are good and sufficiently curious, of course much inferior in size and richness to those of Stamboul, Constantinople. Most of the goods exposed, not of native manufacture, are Russian. The Russian goods are liked in the Eastern market. They are very cheap and very strong. In fact, are suited to the country. They are also, alas, very ugly. The tremendous land journey from Trebizond, or that from the Persian Gulf, or the alternative from Baghdad via Kermanshah, closes the Persian market at Teheran to the English. Fortunes, however, are made there. An importer of French goods, which are particularly appreciated by the Persians, having retired with a large one. About 400% is generally charged, which covers the heavy freight and the duty, and leaves about cent per cent profit. We found a great deal of gaiety at Teheran, a weekly dinner at the embassy, generally a daily drive, and the society of many Europeans of different nationalities was, of course, a great break in the monotony of our life in Persia. But our pleasures after 4 months were interrupted by the serious illness of my wife. Our second little boy was born, and we were lucky in having a reliable nurse. The view of Teheran is made very unique by the great semi-extinct volcano, Demarvend, in the distance, which gives it great grandeur, towering as it does over the valley with its top covered in eternal snows, and taking innumerable lovely tints at the rising and setting of the sun. We came to Teheran by the longer way of Natanz, thus avoiding the great Korud Pass, a particularly unpleasant stage when there is much snow, and as my wife was really an invalid, we determined to return to Ispahan driving, a thing no one has done before, and I fancy no one will do again. I had a new set of wheels made specially strong and heavy, and with very strong tyres. I succeeded in buying a second pair of half-broken horses, in case my own pair came to grief, and we left in the autumn for Ispahan, the nurse and babies occupying the Takhtrohan, while my wife and I went in the trap. We drove through the town with some trouble, and as soon as we were clear of the fortifications, the road became broad and level, and we reached Hajiabad, a garden, where we stopped the night. The next day we crossed a rocky mountain, having to drag the phaeton by hand some miles, and then, locking the wheels with ropes, we got it down a very steep place. The rest was plain sailing, and the roads were generally fairly good. My wife had to get out only some 4 times on a 15 days' journey, and it was only on getting into or out of villages, where there were at times deep ditches, but plenty of willing helpers, that we had any difficulty. On our last stage but 3, we mistook the road, and came 48 miles instead of 24. We, however, only used our second pair once, as they were very unsafe, and our horses, strange to say, did the whole journey well, and arrived in fair condition. At the last stage but 2, a ridiculous accident occurred. We had frequently snapped the heads of bolts, and even the bolts themselves, by going over very rough places, the jolt breaking the heads off, as they were steel. These we generally detected and replaced by others, which we had caused to be made in Teheran. But Murchika is a big village with numerous twists and turns between dead walls ere one gets to the post-house. We had come a long stage, were very tired and very anxious to get in, and instead of going over a deep dry ditch which we had to pass, and which was very narrow, in a careful way, I was foolish enough to try to pass it quickly. The result was a snap of all 3 bolts that fixed the trap to what is, I fancy, technically termed the fore-carriage. The thing hung together till we had got the hind wheels out of the ditch, and then the horses, pole, and 2 front wheels went on, the carriage itself remaining behind and falling forward, and had not the apron been up, we should have been shot out. Fortunately, the reins were long, and the horses easily pulled up. They were probably unaware of the accident. Though we were in the village, there was no one about. The servants were either in front with the bedding, or behind with the loads. Yet in 5 minutes the bolts were replaced by fresh ones, and we were proceeding on our way. At this stage our little boy was taken very ill, and we both felt that another march in the sun and the Kajawes, with his man-nurse, might be fatal to him. So next morning we started very early, and taking him in the trap, which had a hood and an opening with a cut leather curtain behind that made it very cool, we hurried over the 22 miles, and did it in 2 hours and 20 minutes through deep sand. The next day's stage was a very bad one, as, though short, we had to pass through the town, and had to take the horses out twice, and I dreaded our own very narrow and dangerous road to the house. However, we got in without accident by starting at dawn before 10, and the child, by rest and nursing, was soon himself again. The sun in Persia is a very insidious enemy. Many cases of sun apoplexy each year are seen, and I had a fixed rule that except for evening rides, my wife and I always wore an Elwood sun helmet, and this was the only real way to preserve oneself. All other things but the topi were valueless, unless one uses the hideous pith hat or resorts to the turban. Of course, in India, these precautions are still more necessary. I don't know if these sun hats are made for children. They are very necessary if children are allowed to go at all in the sun, and they will go. The natives will let them. But really good-looking riding hats are turned out for ladies. My wife had a solar riding hat a la Gainsborough that was almost becoming, so that ladies at least have no excuse. I was constantly warning those under my care of the danger of little caps, billycocks, etc., but in many cases I was looked on as a molly, though I felt it my duty to press my warnings. Of another thing I am convinced, that the powerful effect of the sun is much lost sight of in Europe, and I look on a bright helmet of metal, unless air-chambered, as an invention of the devil, and pity the poor lifeguards, etc. The horsehair, however, happily saves them a little. On our journey down, at a place called Sinsin, we saw a big turkey, and succeeded in buying a pair for 50 krans, supposing them to be the only pair. We found afterwards that the headman of the neighbouring village had 100 birds, and the price afterwards fell to 8 shillings a bird. We were very successful in rearing the young turkeys, the hens sitting on their own eggs, and proving good mothers. So many poults did we have that when we left Ispahan 18 months afterwards, we ate 2 a week for nearly 6 months. The turkeys were of 2 varieties, the ordinary black ones, as seen in Europe and of large size, and a smaller bird of lighter colour and more delicate. Some of the latter were almost pure white. Peacocks are much valued in Persia, and supposed only to be kept by royalty. The English minister has several fine birds, and the privilege of keeping them is jealously guarded. We brought a quantity of tame ducks down from Teheran. These increased and multiplied amazingly, and bred with some wild ducks of the common kind. We brought also 3 geese. Geese, ducks, and turkeys were common long ago in Julfa, when Ispahan was the capital. But the Armenians, finding that they had to pay a yearly tribute of fat birds, allowed them to die out, and so escaped the exaction. However, when we left Julfa, all the Europeans had turkeys and ducks, and there were plenty of geese at So, 3 stages off. So doubtless, by now, 2 years, they are plentiful. We were glad to get back to our own home, for though Teheran gave us most of the joys of civilization, still we felt that our home was in our big house at Julfa. And how we did enjoy not having to start as usual the next morning. Our stay in Ispahan was not checkered by any very exciting events, save those personal to ourselves. During our sojourn, 2 ambassadors passed through it. One, the Burmese, an old and cheery man with huge ears, accompanied by a staff of attachés, one of whom spoke English well and had been educated at King's College. He was supposed to be carrying rubies for disposal through Europe. He had a ring with him as a present from the King of Burma to the Shãh. Hoop, collet, and all were cut out of one solid and perfect ruby of the first water. A truly barbarous present. These Burmese all wore the national apology for unmentionables, a handsome sheet of silk, termed a languti. This is wrapped around the waist and depends nearly to the feet. Their heads were bound with fillets of muslin. The zealous Sultan gave an entertainment in their honour, to which we were all invited. A fair dinner was followed by fireworks. Those in Persia are always fairly good, the only thing being that Persians do not understand coloured fireworks. Otherwise, their displays are very good. One very good feature is that the public are always freely admitted. All the walls are marked out with clay oil lamps, and festoons of the same hang from wires affixed to the high poles. These are lighted after sunset as soon as it is dark. Music of a promiscuous character is played, all the musicians and singers joining in to different airs. The military bands strike up, each man playing his loudest at his own sweet will. A gun is fired, and the huge golden rains from earthen cones light up the whole scene, disclosing a shouting throng of good-tempered Persians of the lower orders, all people of condition having been provided with rooms and seats. All the roofs are thronged with crowds of veiled women. Flights of rockets are continually let off, and the set pieces soon commence. These are supplied in great profusion, and save for the want of colour, they are quite equal to any effort of European pyrotechny. A row of wretched Jews are now pushed into the tank, a proceeding which always accompanies any official display of fireworks. I know not why, unless it is to let the poor Jews feel, even in times of rejoicing, the wretchedness of their position. Dancing boys dressed as girls twirl and tumble. Buffoons dance and pose grotesquely. The noise of music and singing is at its loudest. Kurbagha, frogs, a kind of water firework, are thrown in the tanks in every direction, and as the set pieces are fading, the whole concludes with a tremendous bouquet of fire, as in Europe. The Japanese ambassador, or rather commissioner, was received with less ceremony, as he was proceeding incog on his way to Europe, having a mission to introduce Japanese goods to the notice of Europeans generally. His attachés, too, spoke French and English, and were funny little fellows, but, as the Persians put it, too ugly to have any value, even as slaves. We patronized art in Ispahan by having oil paintings executed by native artists, of incidents in Persian life. Some of these were sufficiently curious. Among the subjects illustrated were the Sticks, a very tragic picture indeed, where the expressions of pain, terror, supplication, and ferocity were well shown. Another amusing series were 5 pictures representing the history of Bahram and his queen. The monarch is shown as pinning, with a master shot from his bow, the foot of an antelope to its side while it was scratching itself. "What do you think of that?" says the exulting king. "Oh, practice makes perfect," coolly remarked the lady. They naturally separate, for it is a dangerous thing for a wife to disparage her husband's shooting. And here a curious parody of an ancient classical legend occurs. Bahram hears of a lady of great strength who is in the habit of carrying a full-sized bull to the top of a tower. He goes to see the prodigy, and sees a lovely woman perform the feat, scene depicted. His astonishment is manifested by his placing his finger to his mouth, the typical gesture for this sensation in Eastern art. "Oh, that is nothing," says the triumphant queen. "Practice makes perfect." She then explains that she had commenced her feat when the bull was a little calf. The king smiled and took her back. Many of the subjects illustrated were the histories from the Quran. Thus the passage of the Egyptians and their subsequent fate in the Red Sea is shown. Pharaoh and his host drowning, while a green-winged angel exhibits to the sinking monarch a divine scroll on which his sentence is written. The expiring Egyptians are good, and the look of horror on the face of Pharaoh is well done. But a small steamer is seen in the distance. Another picture was the staff of Aaron changed to a serpent, having devoured the serpents of the magicians of Egypt. Here the winged dragon or serpent of Aaron is so tremendous that Wagner would have been glad of him at Bayreuth. He is vomiting fire and is a bogey of the first water. Pharaoh, his eyes starting from his head, is depicted in horror, while Moses has the satisfied expression of a conjurer after a successful tour de force. Another represents Iskender, Alexander the Great, who, having conquered the world, proceeds to the regions of eternal night, as according to Persian legend he did in fact. The conqueror and his warriors are well and carefully drawn, many of the figures carrying torches and cressets, but the eternal night is shown by painting the whole of the figures, trees, etc., on a black ground, and a curious effect is thus produced. Solomon, in all his glory, see frontispiece, is a favourite subject. Solomon, who had the power of speaking the languages of animals and all created things, and who could command the spirits of the earth and air, is seen seated on his throne. Above his head is the fabulous bird, the simurg. To his right, on a perch, is his favourite, the hoopoe. Below this are two tiny efreet. The Queen of Sheba is seated in a chair of state. Behind her are her female servants and slaves, and two gigantic jinns, genii. To the king's left are his vizier Asaph, the author of the Psalms of Asaph, or possibly the person to whom they were dedicated, and Rustam, the Persian Hercules, armed with his bull-headed mace. Behind them are four jinns of terrible aspect. The air is full of birds, and the foreground of beasts, reptiles, and insects. The tiny figures with crowns are angels, servants of Solomon. The turbaned figures are courtiers and servants. End of section 35. Section 36 of In the Land of the Lion and Sun, or Modern Persia, by Charles James Wills. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Beeswaxcandle. Chapter 35. We return via the Caspian. Part 1. A severe winter, diversified with occasional fine weather, when the days were even hot in the sun, brought the Nowruz, or Persian New Year, and the commencement of spring. Our servants brought their plates of sweetmeats to mark the day, and duly received a month's pay or clothes to that amount. The woman servant, Bebe, brought her mistress an earthen water bottle, around the ledge of which was sown barley, the grains being held on by a bandage, and the porous jar keeping them constantly wet. The result was a number of rings of bright grass, the whole forming a very pretty and original, if useless, present. It is a common custom to do this in Shiraz at the New Year, and even the poorest has his water-pot covered with brilliant green. Our cook is giving some trouble just now, for though a capital chef, and though he has been with me 14 years, having begun at 8 shillings a month, and arrived for the last 5 years at 40, and the spending of all the money, yet he has his vices. When he was first with me as a youth of 19, he was perpetually getting married, and as frequently getting divorced. Then he took to getting continually arrested for debt. Next, drink became his foible, and this endured for about 4 years. Dismissal, the bastinado, by the authorities, fining, were all tried without avail. At length, in despair, I sent him to the head of religion in Ispahan, with a note to the sheikh, in which I apologized for troubling him, but stated that the man was a very old servant in whom I had a great interest, and would he make him take the pledge? The cook, who took the note himself, had no idea of the contents. He told me that the sheikh read it and told him to wait. When the large assembly that always throngs the sheikh's house had disappeared, the old gentleman produced a Koran and proposed that the cook should take the pledge. He dared not refuse. After swearing to take no wine or spirits, a formal document was drawn up, to which the cook attached his seal. The sheikh wrote me a very polite note, and assured me that the man would keep the pledge. It appeared that he exhibited a tremendous tatsiana, or cat-o'-nine-tails, to my man, as what pledge-breakers are punished with. The cook was now for weeks as sober as a judge, but he was becoming a fool. The dinners were spoiled or incongruous, or both. In fact, as he must do something, he had become an opium-eater. Opium, though habitually used by the aged both sexes, is seldom taken to excess, save by lutis, or confirmed debauchees. At last, finding it impossible to cure this determined offender, I gave my reluctant consent to his proceeding to Kermanshah, his native place, where he wished to stay at least a year. I never saw him again. I don't know if the last straw was the loss of our cook, or if we had come to the conclusion that definitely Persia was not the place for a lady. But we decided to go home on 2 years' leave, to which I was now entitled, and as we felt that it was very probable we should never return, we determined to sell off our entire kit. We accordingly drew out a catalogue of our worldly goods in Persia, and distributed it among the telegraph officials. By a couple of months, everything was disposed of, but the rubbish. This was sold by auction, and produced a keen competition among the Armenians. I was enabled to get rid of our phaeton without loss, for a Persian of wealth, the Mulavi, gave me within £40 of what I gave for it, and the horses. And the severe work we had had out of trap and horses for 2 years was well worth the difference. Captain W., who was expecting his sisters out via Russia, took all our road kit and saddlery, and my wife's mare, and the Taktrohan, all to be given over at Resht on the Caspian, so we were quite free to start. Our journey home. March the 28th, 1881. Ispahan, Julfa. At last I hear that a muleteer is found who will go direct to Resht by way of Qum, Hajib, and Kazvin, avoiding the capital. I go to the house of a Baghdad merchant in Julfa, and find the muleteer, who is being regaled with pipes. He is the head man of the neighbouring villages Saethon, 3 villages, and the proprietor of 100 mules. I am told that his son-in-law will go with the mules, and am introduced to a young fellow some 6 feet high and thickly built, who is a Tabrizi, and speaks good Turkish and bad Persian. He is wearing the large, heavy sheepskin cap of Tabriz, with the wool long. The merchant informs me that he thinks the hire should be 60 krans per mule. This is said in English, and he then turns to the elder man and says, "You will, of course, give this sahib mules at 40 krans per mule." The old man replies, "I have, after much persuasion, got Jafar Guli, my son-in-law, to agree to 80. The young man, with many vows, raises his hands to heaven and demands 85. "Why do you throw words into the air, Jafar Guli? As I am this merchant's friend, let us say 80, and the sahib will have had mules for nothing. Of course, we get a present." I hear get up, saying, "These fellows are quite mad. Let us talk to men." They in turn rise and say, "Our last word is 75. So we talk for an hour. Then, and not till then, the ceremony of agreement is gone through, and the articles strictly drawn up by the merchant, after much chaffering. At last he begins to read in a sing-song drawl for our mutual edification the following. "I, Haji Muhammad of Saethon, and I, Jafar Guli, his son-in-law, give and let for the journey to Resht, from Ispahan via Qum, Hajib, Doon, Kazvin, to make 20 stages and halt 4 days at our own expense and at the wish of the sahib. 12 mules, 4 for the mule litter, 2 for the kawajes, covered mule panniers, and 6 for loads. We hereby acknowledge 550 krans, and 200 more are to be paid in Resht. Our hire is 62.5 krans per mule. We will start tomorrow and have affixed our seals." Here they all call on the Prophet, and both muleteers seal, and the merchant witnesses the document, which is handed to me. I give them a cheque for 550 krans, and we all go off to my house to look at the loads. On seeing these, both men begin to vociferate. "Our loads! Such loads! No one ever took such loads! On no account will we go!" "All useless, Haji," we reply, and a pipe is given them. They then proceed to sing their own praises, and we, the merchant and I, profess to love them like brothers. They now retire, and I and my wife and servants begin to pack up our road kit seriously. The travelling gear, got ready long ago, is dragged out and re-examined. Tarpaulin is nailed firmly on the roof of the takhtroan, horse litter, and the same is done to the kawajes. Then thin red covers are put on and patched, new straps and buckles are added to the bedding bags, and the bedding packed so as to get each side one weight. Movable curtains are hung in the takhtroan, and its harness is renewed. In the morning, the assistant muleteers arrive and proceed to cord each box with heavy ropes, leaving the ends loose. These ends are afterwards tied together, and so each half-load hangs on a side of the pack saddle. A long, broad band with an iron ring at each end is flung over the mule and his load, and gradually tightened. Thus loaded, the mule and his burden seldom, or never, part company. The muleteer, having had some of his hire, signed his agreement, and roped some of his loads, is by Persian law bound to go, and we calmly prepared to start the morning of April the 4th. April 4th. No sign of muleteer. We use our road kit, and are in the same plight as when marching. April 5th. Muleteer arrives and requests us to take back our money. Mutual threats and curses deep. Muleteer refuses to salaam. Muleteer is threatened with the governor. Muleteer demands a present. Muleteer is offered a thrashing. Muleteer is insolent. Muleteer is pursued. Muleteer flees. April the 6th, 8 a.m. Muleteer arrives at 6 a.m. Harnesses the takhtroan to two beasts who shy and kick and can't be made to move. Again offers to return money. Is again threatened with the governor and called a Jew. Retires in violent passion. 4 p.m. Arrival of muleteer with fairish horses. By the way, the man's beasts are all yabus, or horses. They are tried and found satisfactory. Assistant muleteer addressed as Haji, pilgrim, a title very agreeable to the lower class of Persians, and regaled with pipes. Head muleteer addressed as that. Muleteer declines definitely to start, and offers to refund, but will go for increased hire. Muleteer publicly threatened with governor and called that windbag. Muleteer retires, swearing he will die rather than start. April the 7th, 8 a.m. No muleteer. 9 a.m. Arrival of muleteer in 9 mules, i.e. ponies, 4 assistants and a donkey. Assistant muleteer is secretly promised 20 kerans if he becomes the slave of hirer, to be given in resht. 11 a.m. Mules at last loaded. They start. The wives of the servants come and weep on them. The takhtroan is carried to the high road. 12 noon. I take N, our English nurse, Frank, and the baby to the starting place, and put them into the takhtroan. Placing Charlie, our eldest, with a nurse boy in one kajua, the woman servant Bebe in the other. They leave. 12:30. I go round my rooms for the last time. A, my wife, and I mount, with our table servant last of all. We leisurely walk our horses out. When we have got a quarter of a mile, our servant swears he has dropped his whip. I refuse to let him go back, as I don't want to lose sight of him. Scene with him. Grumblings, threats. We pass the missionary house. We bid them all good-bye at the door. While this is taking place, Ibrahim, the headman, disappears. I gallop after him, leaving A to come on with the bedding and the groom. After a chase of 2 miles, I catch him. He swears I told him to get up to the takhtroan. Threats, whispered curses. I shout myself hoarse. We cross the river, pass through the town, 4 miles out of which we reach the caravan. On over a sandy and muddy plain to Gez, 4 farsakhs. Time, 4:30 p.m. Tea, 5 p.m. Rest of caravan arrive. 8 dinner, 9 bed. April 8th. Leave Gez at 9 a.m. Over a sandy plain, 6 farsakhs, 23 miles to Murchika. Cold wind, dull day, rain threatening. Arrive at Chopakana, post house, at 5, having breakfasted among some ruins on the road about halfway. The post house keeper at this place was the man who behaved so well to me and lent me clothes when I was robbed, so I gave him a double present as usual and a bottle of wine. April 9th. Left this morning at 7 for Seoul. 6 long farsakhs. Left the plain halfway breakfasted, and at the dam, a long farsakh from Seoul, were met by Sergeant McGee. After 10 minutes it began to rain heavily, and though we cantered for 2 miles, we got pretty wet ere we got our rugs. On their reaching us, it left off raining. Mrs. McGee gave us magnificent high tea. Seoul is a terribly cold place. We were hospitably entertained and well fed, but it is impossible to get warm, even with huge fires. April 10th. In the morning at 5 a.m., the ground was covered with snow, and the weather was severe. It also rained till 7, when it cleared a little. Started the caravan at 8, Seoul was at 9. Rain and drizzled till we got to the Korud Pass, when it suddenly came on to snow heavily. The track was through snowdrifts half melted, and before we had got a dozen yards up the steep ascent, A's mare was off the track, trembling with fear and up to her girths. A, too, fancied, I think, that it was all over with us. The muleteers began to call on God, Ali, and other saints, but we blundered along, one mule only falling. The snow got very thick, but our goggles protected our eyes, and we were heavily wrapped up. One side, the windward, soon got white, and A appreciated the big old-fashioned silk handkerchief which I gave her to keep her sun hat on and protect her face from the snow. After an hour and a half of this, we cleared the pass, the Takht Rohan having got over in safety, and N and the babies not having had to get out, which, if they had been obliged to do, would, with knee-deep snow and 2 feet of mud, have been a serious matter. The snow melted into drizzle, and in a quarter of an hour we were in a sheltered valley in a strong sun, and entering the village of Korud. We got to the post-house, and there took off our wet wraps and hung them up. About 2 hours before sunset, 6 farsakhs, 7 hours in the saddle, all but the last 2 being severe work for a lady. April the 11th. Started early, as we have 7 farsakhs, 26 miles and a half, to do. Though we expected to feel the heat, we soon had to take to our wraps, as a strong Scotch mist with occasional cold showers followed us all through the mountains to the caravanserai of Guebrabad, which is supposed to be haunted. We found it empty and breakfasted with our horses there, but the weather was too awful for N and the children to get out, so we sent them on. Halfway to Guebrabad, we had to pass down the causeway cut in the side of the mountain, which skirts the reservoir fed by the Korud torrent, where is stored the water for the town of Caspian. It is simply a valley, closed at one end by a huge wall of masonry. This retains the waters, the surplus falling over the top like the Staubach on a small scale. Within 2 farsakhs of Caspian, the climate changed. Our faces seemed on fire. We found wheat 2 feet high, clover the same height, and the little rain that fell was warm and refreshing. We got to the telegraph office at 5:30, and were immediately regaled with tea by Mr. S., the clerk there. An hour and a half afterwards, the caravan came in. Here the men went to the bath, Bebe started washing clothes, and after dinner we inaugurated the new hot bath, just built in the government quarters, a great luxury. Here at Caspian we determined to halt a day, and enjoy the genial warmth, doors all open, and the luxury of not having to start in the morning. Caspian is celebrated for silk and velvet weaving, but the silk is generally of very sad colours, and the objects useless to the Europeans, so we could merely buy a few handkerchiefs and some velvet curtains. The water supply from the Korud torrent is collected in the reservoir we passed, and on reaching Kashan is stored in ab-ambars, or water cellars, and when they are emptied, they are regularly refilled, thus getting a supply of fresh and clear water. All about are curious conical buildings of mud, some 10 and 12 yards high. They have small terraces a few inches wide at top, others a foot or two wide at bottom. These are the grain stores of the place, and seem peculiar to Qum and Kashan. I tried to pick up some curios in the bazaar, but found it hopeless. The copper bazaar was particularly good and fine, but all of the work was useful, not ornamental. Was bothered by visitors the greater part of the afternoon, most of whom came for advice gratis. Near this place is Fien, one of the royal palaces, well worth a visit, but as our horses needed a rest as well as ourselves, and it is a 4-mile ride, and I had seen it, we did not go. April 13th. Bid goodbye to Mr. S. He had most hospitably entertained us. Left Kashan for Sinsin, 6 farsakhs. Found the immediate neighbourhood of the town well sprinkled with villages. They, however, soon ceased, and we came to a sandy desert where it was very hot. Arrived about 3:30. Directly we got in, we poisoned the kanat, the underground canal for irrigation, in order to get a dish of fish. In about an hour the fish came to the surface quite intoxicated, and were caught and gutted at once. They were very good, and the poison did not affect us. I used 6 berries only of Cocculus indicus, and we got about 6 pounds of fish. We got a good dinner at 9, soup, fish, roast lamb, pâté de foie gras, tinned peas, apricots and custard, Ispahan wine, port, coffee, cherry brandy. This gives some idea of what a good road cook can do. Directly we arrive in a place, our farash and tableman, who keep up with us, drag out our carpets, sweep the little dirty rooms out, spread the carpets, fill our bags with chaff for beds, make our beds, prepare tea, and bring me a water pipe. Then, when this is completed, the takht rohan, loads, children, tables and chairs arrive. In and the children go to their room. We get chairs and have tea and biscuits or bread and jam. Of course, we've already had déjeuner à la fourchette with 3 or 4 dishes and tea on the road. In the early morning we have a slice of bread and butter and a snack with chocolate and milk. After afternoon tea we doze, read, write and stretch ourselves, or go for a little walk near the Chapakana or caravanserai as it may be. The little sketch of the Chapakana at Sinsin I made on the spot, and it gives a good idea of the regulation Persian post-house. In these post-houses the traveller in Persia passes a good deal of his time. They are all built upon this plan, and pretty much alike. The wall at the top is seen to be crumbling. Most of them are in varying stages of dilapidation. They are all built of sun-dried bricks, except in the extreme north, and plastered with mud and cut straw, kargil. In the front is seen a takht rohan or horse litter in which ladies of rank or invalids usually travel. April 14th. Leaves Sinsin at 7 a.m. for Pasangun, 7 farsakhs, 26 miles and a quarter. Halfway breakfasted at Shur-Ab, Saltwater, where Sergeant McL was killed, a wretched, ruined hole. The name is a good one, as nothing but salt water is to be got there. Heavy showers caught us in the afternoon before we could get into Pasangun. From this place to Qum is only 4 farsakhs, and the gold dome of the great shrine can be seen from here. Road all monotonous but good, with an undulating country perfectly bare. April 15th. Left at 8 for Qum, as we are to breakfast with Mr. J, the clerk there. Halfway, 2 farsakhs, in a pretty village, Lengarut, and then a muddy plain, then, after many twists and turns, sacred Qum. Through ruined bazaars, past ruined shrines and tombs, close past the great shrine, through a short but prosperous-looking bazaar to the big bridge, then along the river in the open, sandy but cultivated plain for a mile to the telegraph office. On the first view of Qum, on leaving Pasangun, the great gilded dome sparkles and reflects in the strong Persian sun. Qum contains the tomb of Fatmeh, the sister of Imran Riza, who lies at the shrine of Meshed. Imam Riza is the 8th Imam, and Fatma is considered a very holy person indeed. Many of the kings of Persia are buried in the immediate neighbourhood of the shrine, and numbers of both sexes visit it yearly. And of every 100 people on the 2 stages before we arrived at Qum, 80 were pilgrims. Unlike the Meccan, this pilgrimage can be made at any time of the year. Among Persians, after the great pilgrimage to Mecca, which gives the title of Hajji, that to Kerbala ranks next, and the man who has been there for the rest of his life is termed Kerbalai. This title, too, is generally given to one of the lower orders when one wishes to stroke him in the right way, as is also that of Meshedi, or he who has visited Meshed, as a pilgrim. This is the second great place of pilgrimage. Next comes Qum, and though it carries no title, yet many thousands go there yearly as pilgrims. The tomb itself, I am told by my muleteers and servants, is, as are most graves of holy persons in Persia, covered by an ark. This, in its turn, is covered by a sad-coloured shawl. Of course, it is exactly under the great dome. Round the tomb are laid shawls of considerable value as carpets. Then comes the wooden trellis work, next a row of steel railings inlaid with gold, and outside all a row of solid silver rails surrounded. They are 6 feet high, the thickness of a London area rail. The interior of the shrine is hung with European chandeliers of various patterns, unlighted, and various votive offerings are hung about. Of course, no Christian is admitted. The great dome is covered with small copper sheets, each having a layer of pure gold an 1/8 of an inch thick on the outer surface. The gold never dulls in the pure air of Persia. The top ornament of the dome is also of pure gold, and reported to weigh 140 pounds. This is probably not an exaggeration. The bridge over the river, which, save in spring and winter, is dry, has nothing remarkable about it. There are a few gaudy columns on it covered with blue and yellow tiles. The bridge itself is steep and narrow and also badly paved, as are most bridges in Persia. Qum lives entirely on the pilgrims, and is also a centre for muleteers. This journey is the first occasion of my getting them, muleteers, to start on the next morning, as they and the servants generally find a strong attraction in the shrine. Here, too, is a favourite place to make tawbeh, or a vow of abstinence from some particular sin. The vow is registered solemnly at the shrine, and generally, for a time at least, kept. In the afternoon I sold my last pony to the muleteer, and have now no horses of my own in the country. My wife's mare was already sold to be given up at Resht, and my other pony on the same condition. Here, too, I discharged my groom, an ill-conditioned fellow who was lazy and useless, as I had only one horse to be looked after, and the undergroom could manage that. April 16th. Left at 11 for Puli Delak, the Barber's Bridge, so called because it was built by the court barber of the day. We should not have gone to Puli Delak, but the road to Medjabad is blocked, the river being unfordable, so we have come to this place, the 3rd stage from Teheran, to cross the river at the Barber's Bridge. This gives us a stage more. The bridge is the usual thing, but longer, and an artificial causeway has been built with the Qum River and another join our bridge, crossing the other stream, name unknown, while a few broken arches only are left of a continuation to the right of the causeway, of a bridge which once crossed the Qum River. At sunset, as is usual at this place, it blew great guns. When we woke it was raining hard, and it cleared at 8 a.m. April 17th, 8 a.m. At the time we started the caravan, we got off ourselves in a drizzle, which at 9:30 became a shower, and then heavy rain. This continued till 11:30. Came down in buckets full. Our puggarees got wet and so heavy that we had to remove them. A, over her heavy jacket, put a so-called waterproof cloak, and over that a thick wool shawl. Her knees she kept warm by one of my overcoats, but the bottom of her habit ran water. I had a blanket with a slit in it, and a big plaid kept my legs dry and warm. It then cleared. The sun got hot. The wraps were hung on the loads to dry, and at 3 we arrived at Shãh, an outlying village, very poor, as all such villages are. 4 walls, a turret at each corner, a ruined room over the doorway. The 3 sides within were mostly surrounded by hovels of the beehive order of architecture. 2 of these we cleared out. Our servants took a third, while my wife's mare got a fourth. The rooms were small but clean and comfortable. A hole in the roof lets out smoke. There is even the luxury of a door. In the centre of the village square is a small pen. We inspect it. It contains some 25 lambs, 3 or 4 days old. At sunset, on the arrival of the mothers, after having been milked, the bleating and noise is something awful. The pen is opened and the lambs distributed. Some of the mothers find it difficult to recognize their offspring. Soon, however, with the help of the villagers of both sexes and much laughter, all are given to their own mothers. Weather fine and warm. No need of fire. We dine and sleep. Villagers polite and good-humoured, quite ready to turn out. Many chattels left in our rooms with perfect confidence. Of course, they expect a little present. Shãh is 4 farsakhs from Pul-i-Delak, over a sandy road very heavy from rain. A choice here of clear water which is salt, muddy water which is sweet. Chose the muddy. No insects in our humble lodging, which was clean and comfortable. Villagers civil and very obliging. Present on going, 3 karans, 2 shillings and 3pence. They were delighted. April 18th. We left at 9 a.m. in fine weather for Baghi Sheikh, Garden of the Sheikh. 5 farsakhs. After a long 2 farsakhs, we came to a large and prosperous-looking village on the edge of the salt plain. Here, outside the walls, was a large and good disused hammam, or bath. We breakfasted there, in it, as it was cool and quiet. After 2 hours at 2, started again, entered salt swamp, fortunately dry. After 2 miles, came on good road, and made the large Shah Abbas caravanserai at 5 p.m. A mile before reaching it, we struck the high road from Qum. A large caravanserai in good repair, no doorkeeper. Took 4 rooms, 1 for us, 1 for N and boys, 1 for servants, 1 for mare. Not a soul in the place. About 4 or 5 miles before getting into this place, one of the ponies I had sold to the muleteer dropped, as if shot. He didn't hurt me beyond pinching my ankle a little. He dropped so suddenly, his foot giving way, that I was not quick enough. I am sorry for the chabradar. One leg is evidently gone. Some 100 mules now in the caravanserai, noise of their bells all night long. Country fertile, lots of villages all down the valley. We passed several on our left only. Enlighten the kalyan, or water pipe, the way of preparing burning charcoal on the road without a fire, and with speed and economy, is ingenious. A light is put to a bit of charcoal that is placed in a wire basket the size of one's fist among other pieces of charcoal. The basket is then swung round at the end of a piece of string, and a handful of glowing charcoal is produced in 3 to 5 minutes. Difficulty in getting our chaff beds filled here. Man would only sell chaff, not lend it. Told me he was ill. Told him I had the exact remedy for his disease. Delight of chaff man. Told him I never gave away medicines. Demanded 50 karans. Rage of chaffed man. He gave chaff, and I physic. April 19th. Left at 8:30 for Dung. Weather fine. Rode an uphill one. Saw heavy storms going on in the mountains, and one passed us about 2 miles off. Much forked lightning in the mountains. At 12:30, one was coming straight down on us. The sun was overcast. Suddenly, when our man was getting out more rugs, a few drops came. Then a shower of hailstones all the size of the largest cherries, some larger. The noise was terrific. The horses got frightened and rushed off the road. One mule threw his load. I got off and got hold of A's mare. It was as much as I could do to hold both horses and get her off. The servant's pony broke loose and kicked at the hail. None of the beasts would face it. Fortunately, the muleteers held the Takhtroan and Kajawe mules. Down it came, and it hurt. The ground got white. A heap formed to windward of each bush and stone. In 5 minutes, all was quiet. We started again by reloading the wine boxes which had been kicked off by the mule. In speaking of the size of the hailstones, I do not exaggerate, and certainly I never saw any like them. They're all quite spherical, more like balls of hard snow than hail, but very hard. I asked the muleteer if he had seen anything like them. "Oh, they are nothing," he replied. "In the neighbourhood of Ararat, I have seen them as large as eggs, and they killed lots of sheep." I thought him what the reader may think me. At 3:30 we got into Dung after 6 hours and a half in the saddle. We found a big caravanserai with only one room, the other places being merely stables which were full. However, some camel men politely vacated it, and we, after some half-hour's sweeping, made it very warm and comfortable. Fortunately, it was a large one, 20 by 10, and sheltered, being built at the end of a recess. While at dinner, something fell on the table. It was a camel tick, and I expected what followed. A camel tick is a flat insect which is active when not distended and hungry, but very sluggish when full. We caught a small one in the bedclothes, but saw no more. In the night, however, one bit in on the top of her head. The wound bled freely. This place was painful for a month. In the morning, on walking over where some 200 camels had lain, it was difficult to avoid treading on the sluggish and gorged beasts, who looked like smallish cockchafers. I mean the ticks. April 20th. Started at 8 for Hajib, 6 farsaks. On getting to a big caravanserai halfway, got down to breakfast, muleteer going on. But in an hour he returned, saying Hajib was not safe to stay in at night, so he advised stopping where we were. We took 3 rooms. They seemed comfortable. Sleet storm in the afternoon. The name of this place is Koshkirut, dry river. I don't think there are any ticks here, but we shall see. 1 tick found, no one bitten. A tremendous wind blew all the 20th, making it very cold out of cover. No robbers, which was lucky, as the caravanserai has no doors. April 21st. Started at 7 a.m. Went through undulating hilltops, with only a few black tents in them, but plenty of grass. Saw 4 troops of antelope. On getting to Hajib, 3 farsaks, found that one side of the caravanserai had fallen down, and the place was really not safe from night thieves. Got breakfast of grilled mutton and macaroni. Sent some on hot for N and the children, who do not stop on the march. After 1 3/4 farsaks, of same sort of country, got to a descent and came to a large plain. The plain of Caspian? Thickly sprinkled with villages. Though the wind continues, it is much warmer here, and the sun stronger. The muleteer says we will have this wind to Caspian, or a stage beyond it. The first village, Al-Sung, 5 farsaks from Koshkirut, we did not stop at, but went a farsak further to Bowin, a large village. Here we got a good carpeted room in the large house of a villager, and another room for N and the children. In our room are the man's carpets and all his valuables, boxes, etc., but they are left to our mercy without the slightest hesitation, his bedding, his clothes, and all his earthly goods. The people of this place are very well-to-do. They speak Turkish and do not understand Persian. The women do not hide their faces. As we are having a cup of tea, we get astonished at not hearing the arrival of our caravan. I had ordered the servants to stop it as it passed the door. I suddenly hear that it has passed the village. Ibrahim, my head man, at a crab's run goes to stop it. I saddle a horse and gallop out. At the other side of the village I find Ibrahim calling, "Hoi! Hoi!" to the caravan, which is a mile off. He calmly informs me that they don't hear him. I reply, "Ass!" and canter after him and bring them in. On nearing the house, a mob of boys, headed by a youth of 18, amused themselves by hooting me and calling out, "Dog of a European," in Turkish. I remonstrate in Persian. Delight of boys who hoot more. I produce 2 of my 4 words of Turkish. Kupak ogli, sons of dogs. They throw stones. I ride at them and give my village youth the lash of my crop across his face. They flee and throw stones from a distance. A rival of my muleteer, who remonstrates in Turkish with some elders, informs them that I am a European ambassador, elçi Ferengi, and dangerous to tamper with. They apologize. I reply in a lordly manner, "Çok yakshi," Turkish for very good. My other 2 words. Have tea. 10 p.m. dinner. April 22nd. Started at 8 a.m. Gave our landlord 2 and 3pence, with which he was satisfied. Of course, as we had bought grain, bread, wood, etc., he had made a good thing of us. Wind still blowing very hard. Lots of villages in cultivation, the sun being stronger. The wind is not so troublesome as yesterday, and we need no wraps. Still, it is difficult to talk. After 2 farsaks, pass through a salt swamp, which is fortunately dryish. Arrive at Kera, 4 farsaks from Boween, at 2:30. Caravan gets in at 3:45. Find a fine caravanserai, but no rooms, the villagers having built up the entrances of the 8 rooms there are. We find the shopkeeper and take possession of his shop and the 2 next rooms. We have a door once more, a real door. All his commodities are scattered about, and he does not remove a thing. It appears this caravanserai is very little used, save by those who stick in the salt marsh. This, in wet weather, though only 8 miles, must be a good day's march, and sometimes even impassable in places. There is a causeway of big rough stones, but all the bridges were broken. At 5 p.m. wind went down to nearly nothing. All today, over the swamp, the weather seemed dull from dust storms in the distance. We, however, fortunately, did not get into one. A's saddle will give her mare a sore back if she rides her, so she is compelled to ride one of the ponies, a hard trial after the easy and willing mare. I had the benefit of the mare, as my saddle doesn't gall. The back was better on arrival than when we started. Our mules, yabus, i.e. pack ponies, are in fair fettle, considering that we have only halted 1 day at Kashan. Tomorrow we strike the great high road, and we left Robberland yesterday. The children, the baby included, as yet have not had a day's illness, and we are all in robust health. All our rooms have been as yet wind and watertight, and save at So, that very Hyperborean place, we never had or needed a fire. We are hurrying on, as the steamer, so they say, leaves Enzeli on the 2nd, and if we do not halt, we can get a day there to repack and wash clothes, pay off the servants, hand over my road kit, which Captain W. has bought, get money from Messrs. Ziegler, and start comfortably. Inshallah. Please God. Talking of doors, when we have no doors, we nail up 2 curtains overlapping, if a big entrance, with an extra one crossway over the top if high, and at bedtime we put crossways over the bottom of the curtain, our tabletop and frame, and 2 chairs built up, so that if anyone attempts to get in, the whole must come down onto a big copper bath with a crash, and so wake us. I rather pride myself on this arrangement, which is, I fancy, very efficient, and keeps out wind and thieves too. All the people here are big-headed, big-hatted, big-eared, small-eyed, stupid, shubuk-smoking, Turkish-speaking people, quite different from the smart and polished Persian of the south in Ispahan. but they are honester, not grasping, and in reality more obliging. Instance this morning. My cook asked a man to help him load his mule, i.e., give him a lift with his big saddlebags. He replied, "Load them yourself." On my asking the fellow if he called himself a Mussulman, he grinned and helped at once. Into section 36. Section 37 of In the Land of the Lion and Sun, or Modern Persia, by Charles James Wills. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Beeswaxcandle. Chapter 35. We return via the Caspian, Part 2. April 23rd. Started at 7 for Caspian. Lovely day, no wind, but after the first hour a good deal of sun. After 3 long farsakhs came in sight of Caspian. Another farsakh arrived at 1 p.m. People well-to-do. Heard that there is an hotel here, but distrusted it. Went to a fine new caravanserai, where we got a courtyard to ourselves. Our muleteer says our beasts cannot go on, so we must perforce halt today. We have a grand clothes washing and child bathing today. Settle our trunks for the sea voyage. In the afternoon I go to see the hotel. I find what I expected. A very fine house, with bare walls, enormous charges, and impudent and dishonest servants. I should be very sorry indeed to put up there. I thrashed one fellow as it was for putting out his tongue. The rest at once became polite. They say that the steamer goes twice a week, Sunday and Thursday. I shall inspect the hotel again tomorrow. There is a big tiled shrine in which is the tomb of the son of Imam Ritza. It seems a good repair, but not in good taste. Also a Musjid-i-Juma, big mosque, much ruined. April 24th. I find, after seeing the Russian telegraph clerk, that the steamers go only once a week, so we must hope to catch that of Sunday the 1st. It will be very doubtful if we can do it. Today I went through the bazaars to try and get a piece of Yezd silk, Hussein Kulikani, for A, but failed. I, however, found biscuits for the children, which the servant said were not to be had. They had been brought from Ispahan, where they were made. When in the Chupakana, I found a Russian locksmith who had come to Persia in search of work. He found none and was returning on foot from Teheran. He left this morning to catch the steamer of the 1st. Turkish is here more spoken than Persian, and the people seemed quite another race, quiet and industrious, and more honest, but rougher. A good many of the houses are built somewhat after Russian style, and our caravanserai had doors, and also big windows to some of the rooms. Everything but the bedding is packed ready for a start in the morning early. I say little of Caspian, having had too much to do to see a great deal of it. Caspian has no special production, it is merely a mart. It is, however, a very populous town, and misrule is not so rampant as in other places. We each wrote a letter home, found no one at the post office, and no letterbox, so had to entrust our letters to the Russian telegraph clerk. They arrived in due course. The place seems much larger than it really is, owing to large plots of waste ground, which are unbuilt on. April 25th. Left for Nãsir. Passed in lovely weather through a grassy plain for 2 farsakhs, then 2 more to Aqaba, breakfasted in the village gateway, then a tremendous 2 farsakhs through the hills to Nãsir. Started at 7:30, got in at 3:30. 7 hours in saddle, 1 hour halt. Found a good room in Chupakana, but the room for the children is full of camel ticks. Moved them to the roof room, which is supposed to be free. Our room is not safe from them, and at night it is too cold to go outside. A will not allow me to sleep in the Takhtaran, so we shall all have to sleep in the room on the roof. Nãsir is a village of merely a few hovels, in a lovely grassy valley. Since Caspian, nothing bare, all grass or cultivation. All night long we were awake at fits and starts, looking for ticks. We must have killed 20. They're ordinary sheep ticks. They seem exactly the same thing as camel ticks, but smaller, and the bites merely cause a spot of effused blood, the size of a split pea at biggest. The camel tick that bit in on the top of her head at Dung has caused great soreness, and the blood flowed down all over her face. I was once bitten on the foot, and tenderness lasted 2 months. Frank and the baby were bitten, each in 2 places. So was A. I was a little bitten, but not by ticks. They leave a round black mark the size of a sixpence. April 26th, 7:30 a.m. Left for Par-Chenar. A steady ascent for 8 miles, then tremendous descents of steepness and difficulty. We had to get off our horses frequently for comfort's sake, and the baby and N had 3 times to get out of the Takhtrohan, while the children had twice to leave the Kajaways. The Takht horses would continue with their hindquarters within 3 inches of the ground at the descents, and sliding along. The scenery was grand in the extreme, and the weather fortunately fine. Small shrubs and wild roses now begin to be frequent. When at the top of the mountain, 2 farsakhs from Nãsir, the view was gigantic. One saw far beyond Caspian, over the plains, and into deep valleys which reached for miles, and were of every shade of grey, red, green, and brown. Some hills even were bright orange, and such a bird's-eye view was it that when we commenced the descent, that I, who have seen many places, never certainly saw anything so vast and magnificent. It could not be called pretty till we got within a farsakh of Par-Chenar. Then it was all green in the bottom of the valley, in which ran a small, swift and turbid river, or rivulet at the present time, doubtless a month earlier, a swirling torrent. The entire stage has been one continuous descent. Got in at 4:30, 8 hours in saddle, half an hour lunch. The people plough the almost perpendicular sides of many of the hills, so we were constantly coming on patches of various greens. The climate has become tepid and full of moisture. Lots of flies. A fine chupacabra with a new water cellar close by, which I attempted to sketch the valley. We are all very tired, and have walked a good deal of the way perforce. A curious thing happened this morning when we left Nãsir. I had given the postmaster my knife to cut something, and when I left I forgot it, and only thought of it when a mile away. I cantered back and found my servants just leaving. I immediately said to the head man, "Have you got my knife as directed from the postmaster?" He took the hint and said, "No, I forgot it." "Give it me." The postmaster put his hand in his pocket and gave it up. But had I said, "Where is my knife?" or "Have you got my knife?" I should never have seen it again. To get on with Persians, it is necessary to be smart and unscrupulous to a certain extent. Their own proverb is, "Better is a lie which causes joy than truth which produces grief." See the first tale in Sa'di. I am afraid my "as directed" was an acted lie. But then, Sa'di is a high authority. There is lots of water here, as the frogs are croaking all night in bursts. A croak, a chorus, silence, a croak, then "Barak, itty, kick, squawk, squawk," etc. Dinner at 9. Hotchpotch and mock turtle soups, mixed. The cook's idea, and a good one. Fresh salmon, leg of lamb, mince sauce, custard and plums, cheese, coffee, cherry brandy, Persian wine, port, Madeira, Kalyan. The climate here, being humid, is very feverish. The people coming up get bitten by ticks at Nãsir, then get fever and put it down to the ticks. May not this theory account for the bug of Miana? We are all taking quinine tonight to avoid it, fever and ague. The grimaces as each man takes it pure from a teaspoon are grotesque, but all know its value and are glad of the dose. April 27th. Left at 7:30 a.m. for Rudbar, an up-and-down road, but fairly good, between mountains, by the bank of the big river, Sufid Rud, White River. Vegetation plentiful, a few trees, barley in the ear. Came to Mungil after several bits of very bad road up and down hill. Mungil and Rustamabad are close together. There is a large olive grove, lots of springs, trees and corn about the village. After a mile came to a junction of 3 rivers, and on turning a corner came to a bridge of 6 arches. This bridge is new and well built. By its side, attached to its piers, is a wooden bridge, so placed that if, as is sometimes the case, parts of the bridge be washed away, there may still be a way over. The wind was blowing a gale upstream, and though there was lots of sun, it made it chilly. The wind under the arches blew up sheets of spray. As soon as we had crossed the bridge, we began a series of steep ascents along an awful road, from 1.5 to 3 yards wide, cut in the side of the cliff, often having a sheer drop, and never any parapet, of several hundred feet to the rushing river. The wind was tremendous. The horses at times unable to march against it, full in our faces. The descents were, it is no exaggeration to say, often of 45 degrees. One had to hold the mane firmly to keep the saddle from going over the quarters, and we could not get down, as the horses would not face the blast riderless. Arrived, the last farsakh being the longest and worst I ever saw in Persia, at Rudbar at 3:30. A lovely village, embosomed in olive groves at the brink of the stream, in a wooded nook. Forest and olive groves on the other side of the stream, which is still shut in by high mountains. We put up at a good but small caravanserai in the village. Here saw the dress of the Gilan working class for the first time. Also Gilan shoes made of raw hide with the hair on. The fronts lace up with hempen string or thong tying over the ankle. Today up to Mungil, and for the last 2 days we met large parties of Chadur-Nishin, or dwellers in tents, with their wives, children, oxen, sheep, tents, horses, dogs, etc., quite in patriarchal style. Everybody carried something, according to size, all save the men. The cows were all laden. One little thing of 5 was carrying on her head her father's hat, all busy in some way or other. We bought a live lamb for dinner, 2 and 3d. The wandering tribe's tents are pitched as follows, and we saw so many that we had an opportunity of seeing each stage. Stakes are driven in the ground in pairs. Between these stakes, a piece of very stiff reedwork, like huge matting, is placed on its edge, in the form of a square. This forms the wall. Strong poles are put in at the 4 corners, and cross poles are attached to these. The whole is fixed to a centre pole, then cloths of black goat's hair are stretched over them. The ground is carpeted, and the whole is windproof, rainproof, and sunproof. The wealth of the owner can be well guessed from the size and newness of his tent furniture. We noticed that they always had with them a primitive sort of plough, the share being wooden. April 28th. Left Rudbar at 8 for Imam Shadeh Hashim. Country more and more beautiful. Wildflowers plentiful. All the hills and mountains covered with trees to their summits. Rode through olive groves, each tree having a big excavation in the ground by its side, which is filled with water frequently, and so the tree is watered. Road very bad, and in many places very steep, almost precipitous. We keep by the left bank of the Sufi Durut, or White River, which is at present the colour of café au lait. After 3 farsakhs we enter woods, the usual English trees, also yews, firs, box, wild vines, figs, and pomegranates, these latter in bloom, ivy convolvulus. The ground is covered with red and white clover and ferns, violets, forget-me-nots, large anemones, and most English wildflowers. Nothing bare. Trees overhang the road. We ford frequent small streams, constant runnels and watercourses. Lovely weather, temperature about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. At 4:30 we come upon a large chaussee, which is perfectly flat, and at 6:30 we get in. 11 hours, half an hour's halt at breakfast, or 10.5 hours in the saddle. A stiff march for a lady. The scenery has resembled the most wooded parts of Switzerland, and at times the iron gates of the Danube, only much more grand than either. We have been in the forest since 2 p.m. and shall be in it till we get to Peri Bazaar. From within a farsakh and a half of this place there have been constant swamps, but even in them the trees are dense. We managed to get all in by daylight, having come certainly 30 miles. We fortunately brought chaff, straw, with us, but no barley is to be got. Mules nearly done up. Happily this chaussée lasts to Resht. We both agree that we have never seen anything so varied or so lovely as today's march, though it was long and fatiguing. I hope we may get dinner at 10:30. It is now 10. The people here have a miserable aguish appearance. Doubtless fever is very rife. We will all again take quinine. The servants decline to do so. I insist. They yield. 10:30. Having happily got barley for my wife's mare, trust to make the muleteer buy some for his mules, but price very high. We pass a nearly sleepless night from warmth. April 29th. Leave Imam Jeder Hashem at 7:30. Ride over the smooth road to Resht. The forest continues, but the trees smaller and more sparsely scattered. A huge ditch at either side of the road keeps it dry. Fields, or rather cultivated swamps, begin to appear in the forest, and gradually become more frequent. At either side of the road, on the bank, are ferns of all sorts, including maidenhair, common male fern, and ox-tongue. Orchids of all colours, buttercups, forget-me-nots, poppies, anemones, violets, myrtle, all blooming luxuriantly. Not a bit of bare earth to be seen. Everything verdant. Quantities of snakes, tortoises, and green lizards, very tame, small and large. At 12 we arrive at the town, and I send on a man to Monsieur Schwab, agent to Ziegler and Company, to whom, Ziegler and Company, I have a letter. Mr. Schwab puts us up in his huge house with great hospitality, gives us a good double-bedded room, and gives his own room to the children, telling us to make ourselves at home. We do so. We find at Monsieur Schwab's Monsieur Vassiliadis, a Greek, formerly one of Raleigh's people, whom I had known in Teheran, and a young American traveller, Mr. Doherty, who says he is a naturalist, and hopes to find curious bugs in Persia. He will. He tells me bug is American for beetle. We breakfast. The rest of the day is occupied in paying off servants, giving over Captain W.'s purchases, handing over the mare, giving present to muleteer, repacking for the ship, getting money, etc. April 30th. We start after breakfast. A and I, with N and the children, in a rough cart on the mattresses and pillows, the luggage in another, the servants on its top. After one farsakh, the last one, we reach, passing through forest and swamp, Peri Bazaar, in the midst of the swamps. Here is the wharf. In a few minutes we get on a boat manned by 6 rowers and haulers, a bowman and a steersman. We take 3 servants with us and the woman Bebe. As soon as we push off from the bank, a rope is attached to the top of the mast, and we are towed for an hour by the haulers through the swamp. They then get on board and row. They row very badly with oars like long-handled spades. When the steersman calls out, "Mohammed," they reply, "Allah Saklasan," in a yelling chorus and spurt. We passed through a narrow natural canal, and then came to the Murd Ab, or Deadwater, a large estuary. We rowed for 3/4 of an hour, and then the sail is set. We left Peri Bazaar at 3 and reached Enzeli at 7. The canal and estuary were teeming with fish and water birds. We saw cranes, herons, cormorants, and unknown waterfowls in thousands, flying up from the reeds or rising as we neared them. We also saw a huge vulture was eating a fish. Or was it a big fish-eagle? But no boat or human being. At each side of the boat are fixed sticks tied in a bundle. These serve as fenders and rowlocks. really the latter being a small ring of rope. We land just at the door of the Prime Minister's harem, a tumble-down place. We find the governor of Gilan in the Behruni, or men's apartments. He has laid down carpets in our rooms, and gives us tea, lights, dinner, and breakfast, i.e., he does so for his friend Monsieur Vassiliadis, and we reap the benefit. Our beds are full of fleas. Weather hot and damp. May the 1st. Lovely weather. Have all ready by 8 a.m. No steamer. Breakfast from Akbar Khan, governor of Gilan. Walk in the gardens. Orange trees with lots of oranges of last year on them. And at the same time in full bloom, quantities of roses, the iris too. Very large and fine flowers. Everything very damp. Rather too hot and sun, but nice breeze. 4 p.m. No steamer. Go over the 6-storied tower of the Shãh, built when he went to Europe. A G-jaw place going to ruin from damp. Protected by mats. We inspect his bedroom, salon, etc. Walk in town, like a Russian suburb of, say, Astrakhan. 7 p.m. No steamer. Bed at 10. May 2nd. Get up at 5. No steamer. At 6 the steamer is seen. We cram in a few odds and ends, cushions and blankets, and make the final distribution of clothes, etc. to servants. We go down to the shore and get into our last night's boat. 8:30. Arrive on board the steamer. Give my servants their presents. They kiss our hands and weep. We weep. The children weep. I send them off by saying their boat is leaving. Our boat is the Tsarevich Alexander, one of the newest and best boats. N has all the ladies' cabin. We have a stateroom below. We take in cargo. 11 breakfast. Vegetables, very well done, come after zakuska, or snack. Then stewed steaks with carrots. Then a sweet sort of omelette with jam. And very little jam. We drink piver, beer of Astrakhan. 1 p.m. Still taking in cargo. 10 minutes to 2. We start, leaving some cargo boats still unloaded. Our principal cargo seems to be raisins, eggs, and cotton, and a little dried fish. But the captain tells me that this is the largest cargo he's ever got from Enzeli. We have been loading busily both fore and aft with steam cranes since the vessel's arrival. We run along the coast, no motion to speak of. Strong sun, weather lovely. At 5:30 we dine, and we took tea at 3:30. Ship's tea undrinkable. We use our own. Dinner is Shãh, one of the national cabbage soups. Cutlets, roast duck, and a sort of bavaroise. We pass, without stopping, Astara at 10 p.m. C getting up. Stop at Linkoran at 1 a.m. Take 8 passengers for Baku. They talk in cabins and wake A. I remonstrate in German, French, and Persian. Dead silence. Leave at 3 a.m. C going down. Tea at 8. Lovely sun. Pass between islands. No sea on. May 3rd. 10:30. Breakfast. 4 p.m. Arrived at Baku. Went on shore. Bought photos of Russian types of Baku, etc. Changed all my Persian money into paper rubles. Exchange 3 rubles 47 kopecks to 1 toman, or 7 and 6pence. May 4th. Again went on shore. There is nothing to see. The usual cheap imitation of French fashions, much business, principally in naphtha. Baku, owing to this, has in 20 years risen from nothing. There is a good natural harbour, lots of Russian officers about. Armenians, Persians, Lesgians, more numerous than the actual Russians. Deep water full of fine fish close inshore. Our big steamer is warped up to a wooden pier 300 yards long. Only 4 other steams lying here, all smallish, 1 bark, and lots of small crafts like galliots. Oranges plentiful and bad. Also tobacco from Riga. I got a pair of Tartar enamelled earrings here and a big turquoise. Noon, 12. Sudden rush the beauty and fashion of Baku to breakfast on board. It appears that doing this and the club are the two amusements of the place. The naphtha trade and the steamer depot, with the garrison, form the society of this place. Festive Russia drinks bad champagne at £1 a bottle after breakfast. First whistle, 1:30. Second whistle, 1:45. Embracing, weeping, departure of festive Russia, leaving some 10 men passengers, one Georgian lady very uninteresting, and one young lady with a quantity of fair hair and a fat baby. Fair one with golden locks is kissed freely by everyone. Third whistle. Final rush. We are warped out. The deck passengers are dissolved in oily and spirituous tears. At 2:10 we paddle off. No sea in the bay. 4:30, tea. 6:30, dinner. Heavy swell on. A and N go below. So does fair one with the golden locks at the end of dinner. A lies down and escapes. 9:15 we all retire. Heavy swell on. May 5th, 7 a.m, no swell. We make Derbend, said to have been fortified by Alexander the Great. We anchor half a mile off. I make a rough sketch. Arrival of fair one with the golden locks, with the locks done into one huge yellow plait. It is 1 foot from the ground exactly. I saved the fat baby's life, who had made for the staircase, and shot into my arms. At 10, leave Derbend. 10:30, breakfast. 4:30, tea. Reach Petrovsk, a fine natural harbour. Within this, the Russians have made a second one, formed by 2 horns of blocks of rough stone, tossed in pell-mell, and masses of concrete, 8 feet by 4 feet, which stand in a row seawards on the loose stones. They have a tramway for horses and 5 men. Each mounts a horse and drags a truck full of stones out, tandem. When they get to the right place, they dismount and throw out the stones. Simple, not pretty, but effectual. They were doing this when I was here 10 years ago. They are doing it now. The place is hardly Russian, full of Leskins, who seem prosperous. I did not go ashore as it was getting chilly, and there is nothing to see. The town covers a large space of ground, but is sparsely scattered, and looks better from the sea than nearer. As we had 1,000 sacks of rice to discharge, we did not get off till 9:30 p.m. Weather fine all night. May 6th. Up at 8. Did up rugs and bedding as we get on the flat at the 6-foot channel in the afternoon, and are towed in it to the Volga boat. We are at present in the boat in which the Shãh made his last voyage to Europe. Of course he had it to himself, and the engineer tells me he slept on the floor of the ladies' cabin and put his shoes on the table. So much for the civilization of the asylum of the universe, the king of kings. The stewards, after a little remonstrance, are civil and obliging. The food good and plentiful, the fish particularly good, while the Astrakhan beer is a great treat. 4 halfpenny a bottle only. We had a lot of port with us, which, as we had to drink or throw away, we preferred the former. The corkage is charged 5 pence. Many Russians bring their own liquor. Children and ourselves all in robust health. The rest has done us good. The officers are all very obliging and friendly, 2 speaking English, all German, and 1 some French. But the stewards were, alas, Russians of the real vieille roche. The bill had to be gone carefully through. I cut off 1/5 of it. They merely smiled, and not finding that we were the sheep who before the shearer was dumb, were very civil. 1:45, nearing the 9-foot channel. Not a ripple. We have been very fortunate, as the Caspian is at times very rough. 4:30, arrived at the 9-foot, as it is called. We go on board the flat. This is a huge barge, some 200 feet long, forward and aft of the holds. In the centre, 20 cabins, each for 4 persons, and the saloon. Over these another saloon and a hurricane deck on top. The sea is like oil, and we leave at 10 p.m, being towed by a small tug. May 7th. Wait to find ourselves in the Volga. At 11 a.m. we reach Astrakhan. Here I go on shore to the office and complain that I have been forced to take a ticket for my 2 children, that I ought only to pay half fare for one. This, however, I put in a veiled manner. I find that children under 10 travel free, and 41 rubles are immediately refunded. Officials of company most civil. Our luggage is merely formally examined. I find all this is because my passport has a favourable mark from my friends of the Russian legation in Teheran, which signifies, treat the bearer well, so they tell me. We are even provided with a private cabin, though every berth has been taken in advance. I and Charlie drive in a droshky through Astrakhan, a hideous but flourishing large town, evidently rich. I buy a pair of Russian salt cellars, ugly but good. I had fever yesterday. I have it again tonight. At 10 p.m. we leave. The current is very strong here, and the long, shallow boats very fast and powerful, but the vibration is tremendous, worse than a railway carriage. There is every comfort, convenience and luxury on board. The scenery of the Volga above Astrakhan, as we see it on May the 8th, is very tame. A low sandbank, a little brushwood, river 2 miles wide. A few villages, country quite flat. Consequently, we see nothing. Here and on the flat, we have had sterlet, the celebrated Volga fish. Fairly good. Nothing wonderful. Here the police tell me not to wear my grey wideawake. As if I did, I should be mobbed as a nihilist. The emperor just assassinated, a mob very excitable. May 9th. Tsaritsyn, 7 a.m. Go ashore and drive to railway station, a very fine building. We dine, and at 3:30 p.m. start in a compartment of a first-class saloon carriage. This we have all to ourselves. About every half hour we stop for 5 minutes at least. One gets in and out as one likes, and the guard takes care that the train does not leave without us. On every platform is a big vessel of clean drinking water for the peasants. Bottled beer, hot pies, and vodka, a very raw spirit, to be got everywhere. The beer 6d. a bottle, and very nice bread, quite a luxury, and so good that the children eat it all day long, calling it cakey. Travel with windows open all night. Pace 17 miles an hour without stoppages. May 10th. Reach Griazi at noon. Sleep in the sleeping room, and after a bath, leave at 6:30 p.m. We have with us sheets, pillows and blankets, and at 8 p.m. we all go to bed, undressing and making ourselves quite at home. Start at midnight. May the 11th. Arrive at Orel, 10 minutes to 9 a.m. Drive round town with Charlie and A in droshky. Buy a gilt silver salt cellar of Moscow work. Nothing to be seen in the town, which seems well-to-do and substantial. Get a bath, or rather wash, and 4 hours nap in the waiting room. Leave at 3 p.m. Carriage to ourselves. In this part of Russia, a train consists of 1 first class, 1 second class, and say 15 third-class carriages. We find that it suits us to go first, as we can lie down and go to bed, which is of great moment in so long a journey. All the seats draw out to form beds, and the carriages are lined with velvet, have double windows, and every comfort on board. Pace 20 miles an hour. No charge is made for the children. Vitebsk at 8 p.m. May 12th. Dunaburg at 5:30 a.m. Here we find a wretched station and buffet. They try to persuade us to go to an hotel. We breakfast at the buffet, and then go by rail some 2 miles to the Dunaburg station of the Warsaw-Riga line. This move was an inspiration. Here we found a really magnificent station and buffet. Nothing leaves till tomorrow at 3:30 a.m, an unearthly hour. We dine at the buffet, and take one of the bedrooms in the station provided for travellers by the Russian government. We get a magnificent apartment for 3 rubles with 2 beds, with blankets and pillows and a sofa. Fortunately, the beds are in alcoves, so I take the sofa, and we all sleep till 3 a.m. of the 13th. We get up, go down to the station, and at 20 minutes past 4 a.m., awful time, start for Berlin. Arrive at Vilna at 8 a.m. Get to Eitzkunen, the Prussian frontier, at 18 minutes to 2. Here a form of custom house examination has gone through. Leave at 22 minutes past 2 and reach Berlin on May the 14th at 10 minutes past 6 a.m. We are all dog-tired, dirty, woebegone in the extreme, our luggage eccentric-looking, and on our arrival at the Hôtel de Arc, unter den Linden, a new and handsome building, we humbly ask for rooms in French. The head waiter patronizingly informs us that he hopes to give us rooms, and informs the manager in German that we may be put anywhere. We are taken into the lift and brought to the 3rd floor. 2 good rooms are shown us for 6.5 marks each room. In all, with extra, i.e. children's bags, 15 marks. When the head waiter sees our piles of luggage arrive and is asked for hot coffee, he becomes polite and servile, and tells us that he can give us better rooms on the 2nd or 1st floors, but we decline to move, sleep being our first object. We do sleep, but miss the vibration of the carriage. They go to the table d'hôte, and as we dread strange liquors, order a bottle of a well-known brand of dry champagne. It appears without label and without cork, carefully frozen. The head waiter glides up and remarks in English, "We find this a very fine wine, sir." I taste it and reply, "You have brought me sugar water. I asked for wine. Take it away." Astonishment of head waiter, who retires with wine and presently returns with the same sweet mixture in an old labelled and capsuled bottle. I taste and point out the label says très sec, and the wine is sweet, in fact, the same as before. He then tells me that the pauvre waiter has made a mistake and will have to pay for the wine if I return it. I retort that that won't injure him, as it can't cost much, and it would injure us to drink it. This to the intense delight of some German officers. The waiter then tells me that he finds that they are out of the wine I want, but he recommends... I decline to drink it, saying I don't care for Schloss Weiß nicht wohl, as I feared getting a second succedaneum. After a sitting at the lengthy table d'hôte of 1 hour and a half, we leave for more sleep. The table was plentiful but common, and required a youthful appetite. This we did not possess. We were both decidedly seedy for the rest of our stay in Berlin. We merely had our morning coffee at the hotel, and dined and breakfasted at Dressel's, a restaurant of European celebrity. The cost was the same, but the wines and cook were undeniable, the attendance good, and the place select and quiet, and only some 300 yards from our hotel in the Unter den Linden. This evening my neck was cricked and gave me great pain. We still could not sleep, missing the jarring of the train. A and Charlie quite knocked up. We are all feeling the cold. May 15th. All of us quite knocked up. Headaches and sleeplessness and want of appetite. In fact, we are getting ill. I went to see the National Gallery and Altes and Neues Museums. Much pleased with what I saw, but my cricked neck annoyed me. A, too ill to go out. Our eldest boy Charlie, still quite done up. May 16th. Saw the galleries again and the waxworks, to which I took Charlie, who seems nearly himself again. Far better than Tussauds. In the evening we went to the Friedrich Wilhelms Theatre and saw The Piper of Hamelin, a so-called comic opera. The singing and acting were good, but serious in the extreme. The orchestra stalls cost only 3 marks, 3 shillings. Began at 7:30, over at 10:30. The players very respectable, and the audience very quiet and appreciative. Dresses good, mise en scène fair, acting equal to that of English provincials. May 17th. A much better. Went for drive in the morning. Had a good deal of business to do to get money and start luggage, etc. At 5, went to Zoological Gardens. A fine collection of magnificent gardens. A concert. Fairly good dinner there. Price very moderate. Lots of guests. Much pleased. These gardens are open till 10 p.m. We returned home by 8. May 18th. Had coffee. Started at 10. Breakfasted at station. Again, no charge for the children. Secured a coupe with washing place, etc. to ourselves after some wrangle with the guard, having to appeal to the station master, who decided in my favour against another claimant, I having placed my hat in the carriage, and so retained it by traveller's law. But the guard had removed it and put other people in. Started at 12 noon for Calais. Speed 40 miles, including stoppages. Lovely country till we got to the iron region. Essen. Krups. Minden, particularly pretty. May 19th, 1 p.m. Arrive at Calais. 1:30, leave by the Calais Douvres. Fair sea on. No pitching, but considerable roll. None of our party sick. Only some dozen ill in all on board. A great improvement on the little boats as to motion. Time 100 minutes. 3:30, leave Dover. 5:30, arrive at Charing Cross Station. Home. Alhamdulillah. Thank God. End of section 37. End of In the Land of the Lion and Sun, or Modern Persia, being experiences of life in Persia from 1866 to 1881 by Charles James Wills.